I can confirm that I have just received the resignation of the Chairman of the Council. Councillor Brian Williams, Vice Chairman, will therefore now take the chair.
Mr Vice Chairman, I nominate Councillor Vince Hunt as Chairman of the Council.
Is that seconded?
Yes, I'd like to second Vince Hunt for Chairman of the Council. Okay, thank you, councillors. I look forward to serving you again for another 12 months. Let's move this bit back. Okay, we'll start with a prayer. Lord, we give thanks for the community of Shropshire, which we are part, for those who share with us in our activities and decisions. As we make those decisions, O Lord, let us be aware of our responsibilities to care for the environment, the elderly, the young, especially those with us today and those they represent, so that they know that they are heard. Help and guide us in all we think, say and do today, as we have this opportunity to make our own contribution to the communities that we serve. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. As I said, good morning. Welcome to the meeting of the council. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say how pleasing it is to be back on what is familiar territory for most of us. But obviously, looking around the room, a lot of new members, it's your first time in here. Since May 2019, we've been in the wilderness. For the benefit of those who are vulnerable or otherwise and anxious about becoming ill, we ask that you respect the decision of those to wish to continue wearing a face mask, please. It's especially important for those listening remotely that you mute any devices and switch your microphone on and off after use. You may find it easier to be seated whilst using your microphone. In fact, it's not a question of easier. Please don't stand up because we are live streaming and the live stream feed does not pick up if you're too far away from your microphone. So for the newer members, in the old days, you would stand up, but while we're live streaming, please remain seated while you're speaking. I'm also going to ask that because you're not standing up, please start by introducing yourself so that people who are watching the live stream know who is speaking. If you're wearing a mask, then please do remove it when you speak. Okay. We'll move on to item 2, which is apologies. Chief Executive.
Apologies have been received from the following councillors: Andy Boddington, Steve Charmley, Nat Green, Tracy Huffer, Heather Kidd, Viv Parry, Alex Wagner gives his apologies for this afternoon only, and Kevin Pardy. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 3, which is election of the Vice Chair. As you saw, the Vice Chair has resigned. The Chief Executive has therefore received that resignation, and I call for nominations for the election of Vice Chair of the Council to serve until the annual meeting scheduled to be held on Thursday, the 11th of May 2023. Do I have any nominations?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Councillor Brian Williams as the Vice Chair for the ensuing year.
Is that seconded?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Brian Williams as Vice Chair for the forthcoming year.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, well, as there are no other nominations, Brian, congratulations. You have, well, been reappointed for another year. Thank you.
I thank the Council for their support and look forward to supporting the Chairman during this coming year. Thank you. I've accepted my honour.
Okay. Item 4, disclosable pecuniary interests. I would remind members to disclose any pecuniary and unregisterable or non-registerable interests in any matter to be discussed, including the interests in their register of interests, and leave the chamber prior to the matter being discussed. Councillor Houghton, Ruth.
Councillor Ruth Houghton, Bishop's Castle. Item 15, motion 6, declaring an interest as a trustee of a care provider.
Thank you. Are there any others? I see no hands. Somebody's computer keeps playing music. Is it possible to put computers on mute as well, please? Thank you. Ba-boom. Okay, item 5 is the minutes. I move that the minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 24th of February 2022, as circulated with the agenda and papers, be signed as a correct record.
I second those minutes.
Thank you. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the minutes, there are several references about actions that should be taken. I note there's at least 5 actions that should be taken, and I cannot, as far as I understand it, none have been taken. Can I ask you, if they are correct, to follow those up to ensure that they are taken? Thank you.
Right, but you have no problem with the accuracy, just the
Agreed.
Carrying out. All right.
Agreed, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker.
I'm sure that's been taken on board. Thank you, Roger. Okay. Item 6 is announcements. To receive such communications as the chair, vice chair, and the head of paid service may desire to lay before the council. Please note those. You've had those separately. I'd also like councillors to note that Councillor Dave Tremlin has resigned from the council on the 21st of April 2022. I just want to thank him for his service for both to this council and to his constituents, and wish him well. I refer members to the list of official engagements carried out by myself and the vice chair since the meeting of the council on the 24th of February, which has been circulated, as I said, by email. Okay. We'll move on to item 7, which is public questions. In accordance with Procedural 14, we will now deal with the questions from members of the public. In accordance with the revised procedure rules, the Assistant Director of Legal and Democratic Services will read out the public questions received from members of the public who are not present. The relevant portfolio holder will respond to the questions. Thank you. There are 5. Peter Phillips.
Am I on? Mr. Chairman, members of council, thank you very much. This question is here because it gives me a chance to hang the matter, hang the whole matter on that peg, so members of council are briefed, and I hope they'll be able to take the matter forward, Chairman. What steps has the council taken to identify vulnerable residents as required by the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act. The Act states that councils have a duty to assess the needs of disabled people for help with the cost of a phone and any necessary special equipment in the event of a phone becoming unavailable. The reason as follows: traditional copper landlines are all to be switched off within the next 3 years. Thereafter, digital voice will be operating. That is, we'll only be able to access a phone via broadband. All the phones will have to be plugged into mains electricity. Copper ones at the moment, of course, have their own power source in the event of a power cut. Routers, of course, will require electricity too. In the event of a power cut, you'll have to use a mobile if you have a signal, and you can only use it until it requires recharging if there's no electricity. Unanswered queries include, for people without broadband, how will they be switched on? What about payphones? There are only few, but by law some have to be kept going for emergencies. What steps have been taken to identify people who are digitally excluded? And especially for the council, the next one, at some stage developers or residents will have to be told that they can't have a copper connection because in due course only fibre will be available. Who decides? When will it be decided? How is that decision to be implemented? By planners or what? What is the position of small suppliers, for example SWS or Virgin? How are contacts with the emergency services to be guaranteed, which they weren't in Storm Arwen? What consultation has there been? BT says it will provide backup battery packs for vulnerable people against power cuts. How will they be recharged, the battery packs? Have plans been made to improve mobile phone coverage? Have the needs of off-grid premises been assessed? There are about 1,000 of us off-grid in Shropshire. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Council. I do hope you'll be able to take the matter forward.
Thank you. I'm going to call upon Councillor Rob Gittins as the portfolio holder for digital data and insight. Councillor Gittins.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Phillips, for your questions. I'll take them one at a time. So your question relating to what steps has the council taken to identify such residents as required by the Chronically Sick and Disabled Act. The council's response is as follows. In the event of a power cut in any specific part of Shropshire, the council and adult social care will work with the distribution network operators, or otherwise known as DNOs, to establish those areas affected and review its own database to identify those individuals who are already known to adult social care within the identified geographical area and who are considered as being at increased vulnerability because of the power cut. These individuals will be communicated and supported through a coordinated approach which will include face-to-face wherever a phone call is not possible. With regard to the specific question in relation to the Chronically Sick and Disabled Act of 1970, this was reappealed at the point that the Care Act 2014 was introduced. The provision of a telephone and any special equipment to enable its use was referred to in the CSDPA 1970. However, technology has understandably moved on considerably during the last 50 years, and the provision within the Care Act 2014 are focused on meeting individual needs and well-being outcomes, which has essentially increased and widened the scope for how various items of technology and digital equipment can be supplied to individuals who live in their own homes and in accordance with the CA 2014 eligibility criteria. Adult social care do keep a record of where such equipment has been provided to individuals and can refer to this if needed. This also includes the very small number of individuals where the telephone equipment and access to a landline has been provided historically under the CSDPA 1970. Moving on to your next question, which was people without broadband, how will they be switched on? People who currently have no broadband will be contacted by the communication provider, or otherwise known as CPs, that provides their landline telephone connection to arrange the migration away from their current analogue connection to a digital one. When, how, and with what equipment this migration takes place will be specific to each CP. The CP for most landline only customers will be BT plc, which is replacing its analog telephone service with a product called Digital Voice. For frequently asked questions relating to BT's Digital Voice, please see the BT website. But just to give a example, a question may come in such as, when will my new equipment arrive? And the answer would be, if you need new equipment, it will arrive before your switchover day. We'll let you know the delivery date. It is important to note that the CP marketplace is aware that some customers will be outside of areas that can be migrated to fibre. To accommodate these customers, we understand that a product has been developed by BT Openreach, which will allow customers to make calls across the legacy copper network. Now moving on to your next question about what about payphones? Payphones or public call boxes are provided by BT plc, which has a universal service obligation administered by Ofcom to provide a reasonable number of working phone boxes where they're most needed. If BT want to remove the one and only call box from a site within 400 metres of the box, they are required to follow an agreed process. When the Openreach analog network serving an existing core box is upgraded to digital, Shropshire Council expects the technology in the core box to be upgraded with no loss of service. Your next question, what steps have been taken to identify people who are digitally excluded? Communication providers are expected to identify which of their customers are vulnerable, including those who are digitally excluded, i.e. they don't have a broadband connection and will need an alternative migration solution. As part of the Council's strategic planning process, digital accessibility is a proposed work stream that will review digital inequality. A range of different data sets will be used to baseline and inform this project work. And just moving on to your next question. At some stage, developers' residents will have to be told that they cannot have a copper connection, and this is the Council's response. Most of the landlines in the UK, including Shropshire Council area, are owned and managed by Openreach. Openreach will issue a stop sell notice for each telephone exchange area once 75% of the premises can access the fibre optic broadband network. This means that people in those areas won't be able to order new landline-based products if a fibre optic one is available. The first telephone exchange in Shropshire expected to be subject to a stop sell is Ludlow from August 2022. And your next question, which was what is the position of smaller suppliers, and the Council's response is small alternative network or altnet broadband suppliers like Secure Web Services, SWS, do not provide services to customers using Openreach's copper landline network. SWS provides a broadband connection to its customers using fixed wireless access and fibre to the premises network technologies. SWS are able to provide voice over internet protocol, or otherwise known as VoIP, telephony services as an As an alternative, this is a commercial decision. Each altnet supplier will make an independent decision on deploying a VoIP solution. There is no obligations on these suppliers to provide telephony services. And then the next question, how are contracts with emergency services to be guaranteed? The council's response, Ofcom states, unlike traditional telephones, a telephone connection to a broadband router will not work in a power cut, as the router gets its power from the mains. If you rely on a landline telephone, for example, you don't have a mobile telephone, you're unable to use a mobile telephone, or you don't have a mobile signal inside your home, your telephone service provider must make sure you are able to contact the emergency services during a power cut. This could be in the form of a battery backup, so your landline telephone will continue to work, or giving you a basic mobile telephone to use in this situation. Agreements between mobile network operators ensures that roaming for emergency calls is available. This means where a member of the public has no signal from their mobile provider, they can use the most immediate and available network to make an emergency call. Your next question is, what consultation has there been? Openreach ran a consultation on the digital switchover in 2018, and you can see the Openreach website for that. Your next question, BT says it will provide battery backup packs for vulnerable people against power cuts. How will they be recharged? The council's response, battery backup is designed to enable people to continue to use their telephone service during a power cut, but is only meant as a short-term solution until such time as the mains power is connected, connection is restored. Ofcom guidance issued in 2018 stated that providers should have at least one solution available that enables access to emergency organisations for a minimum of 1 hour in the event of a power outage in the premises. And the next question, have plans been made to improve mobile phone coverage? On the 9th of March 2020, the government announced that it had entered into an agreement with the 4 mobile network operators to provide grant funding to deliver a shared rural network. Under the terms of this agreement, each mobile operator is committed to providing good quality data and voice coverage to 88% of the landmass by the 30th of June 2024 and 90% by 30th of June 2026, subject to certain conditions, including the provision of funding for elements of the programme. In July 2021, the definition of subsequent coverage deadline was changed from June 2026 to June 2027. And then for your final question, have the needs of off-grid premises been assessed? I will now read out the response. Premises that are off-grid for fibre broadband services have been considered by the government. Last year, the government issued a call for evidence on the subject of very hard to reach premises. And in February 2022, the government issued their response to see this. Based on the evidence that was gathered, the government will set out a series of policy proposals later in 2022, setting out how it intends to address the connectivity challenges of these premises. And finally, just to note, Shropshire Council submitted a comprehensive submission to the Ofcom in 2018 on the issues of protecting access to emergency services in power cuts at customer premises. The submission and extract will be shared with Mr. Phillips, and the evidence demonstrates not only the council's commitment to supporting the people that we define as vulnerable and to emphasising the importance of communication providers like BT playing their part, but also our approach to continuing to take every opportunity that presents itself to articulate the commitment both to central government and to the agencies such as Ofcom. Of note, we have again over the past month engaged with both DCMS and the LGA over the subject of digital switchover. Thank you.
Thank you. Very full. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question 2 from Christine Glover. Christine, are you here? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning. The flooding of one's home is a terrible, terrible experience. The emotional and mental anguish is beyond words. As someone who suffers flooding of my home, I am massively concerned about any building on areas of land prone to flooding. These developments can have a catastrophic effect on those of us who already suffer, particularly those of us upstream of Shrewsbury. It's important to understand the impact of new developments and not just on floodplains. It's my belief that our flooding issues are caused not by of things, including the actions of human beings creating an artificial environment. With each new building development, and I quote, millions of gallons of rainwater that would normally seep into the earth gradually are cascading down gutters into drains and into rivers, which means they'll become raging, vindictive monsters, unquote. In addition to this, there is displacement of water caused by building new access roads. If this trend of new building developments continues, soon there will be nowhere for the extra water to go. If the problem is to be resolved, it's important to look at the roots of the problem and not just the symptoms. It's not enough to erect flood defences, because that just creates a problem elsewhere. My question to Council: considering the flooding earlier this year and its consequences, would now be a good time to abandon the Riverside Development Plan along with the disposal of Shirehole, the two being connected? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Ian Nellins, the portfolio holder for climate change, natural assets and the green economy. Councillor Nellins.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Nellins, portfolio holder for climate change, natural assets and the green economy. And I'd like to thank Christine Glover for her question. Shropshire Council, like you, shares the ambition for pace and progress in finding solutions to flooding across the Severn. With our partners, it is both our role and ambition to enable resilience of local communities across the catchment. For this reason, we established and jointly chair the River Severn Partnership with the Environment Agency. The partnership is a direct response to challenges in securing flood management investment, as well as the increasing frequency and severity of flooding, which requires accelerated delivery. We believe there's a justified case for water management measures across the Severn. However, as you may be aware, current investment in flood management via DEFRA's Flood Defence Grant Aid is predominantly targeted at protecting existing residential properties. This makes it complex to produce viable business cases for new flood risk management schemes. This is particularly the case when seeking options for rural communities where numbers of residential properties are small, or indeed some of the flood-affected urban areas, such as Shrewsbury, where the impacts are on businesses rather than on homes. The partnership believes that a wider approach is needed, which opens up new routes to funding and delivery. The link to future growth and development is key. The scale of investment needed is far more than the public purse is able to provide, and therefore the partnership is exploring how it can provide multiple benefits for people and places from water management and create viable investment cases. It has already been successful in securing over £40 million in additional government investment through this approach, which is being used to deliver water management measures on the Severn, as well as a long-term management plan. This plan will be adaptive to take account of future changes, such as some of those you mentioned. The Riverside development forms one of the important short-term pathfinders under the partnership. To effectively manage risks, Shropshire Council is working closely with the Environment Agency and via the partnership to produce a two-way approach for assessing and managing flood risk on the site. This allows us to take into account what we know about flood risk and therefore how we design the development from the outset, as well as developing a longer-term adaptive plan that can take account of future changes, whether climate change, future investment in flood risk management, such as the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme, or any future developments. Flood risk management is a key consideration in the Riverside work. It is being addressed from the outset in collaboration with the key risk management authorities and provides an opportunity for us to jointly consider how we can embrace both the river and any associated nature-based management measures as part of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to question 3 from Mr. Mike Streetley, which I believe, Tim, you're going to read.
I am. Thank you, Chair. The question is this. I note the recent 30% cut in the Council's capital budget, with the Council's Finance Director saying, due to pressures in the revenue budget, it is not possible to continue with schemes that would add a significant further financial pressure through additional borrowing costs. However, the proposed Northwest Relief Road is still retained and will consume nearly a fifth of the capital budget over the next 4 years. I note that there is a £52 million for the NWRR in the capital budget for financial years 22, 23, 24. Could you please provide the capital spend to date, brackets including any spend from the revenue budget, and the total estimated spend on capital and revenue budgets to completion? The revised price for the new swimming pools in Shrewsbury has doubled compared to the initial budget, and the Council has put the scheme on hold as a result. Given the ongoing spend on the NWRR of thousands of pounds every week and the very high rates of inflation in the construction industry, combined with the fact that any overrun to the cost of the NWRR will be unaffordable given the financial situation outlined above, will the Council immediately put the NWRR on hold pending a review of costs?
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Councillor Dean Carroll, Portfolio Holder for Physical Infrastructure.
Thank you, Chair. The Council has not spent £28 million as has been claimed elsewhere on the Northwest Relief Road to date. The project consists of 2 discrete elements in the capital programme, the Oxon Link Road and the Northwest Relief Road. Whilst these are linked for the purposes of the current planning application and future construction project, they are separated in financial terms for the requirements of the 2 external funding bodies. The Oxon Link Road has a current budget of £12.9 million in total, with £4.2 million of this being externally funded by the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership and £8.7 million being locally match funded through developer contributions. The Northwest Relief Road has secured funding from the Department for Transport of £54.4 million, with a required local match of £19.8 million to be found through developer contributions and capital receipts. In total, therefore, the budget available for the Northwest Relief Road is £87 million, and this reflects the current estimations of cost. It should be noted that the Department for Transport and the Local Enterprise Partnership capital awards are not able to be reallocated by the Council, and unspent budget would need to be returned if the Northwest Relief Road or Oxon Link Road did not go ahead. The Council has so far spent £18.111 million on surveys and designs to date, with just £3.189 million of this coming from the Council's own agreed match allocation to date. As we have stated previously, the Northwest Relief Road, including the Oxon Link Road, remain a key priority for the Council, and we will continue to ensure that the outcomes achieved reflect value from the investment at each stage of the project life.
Thank you. We'll move on to question 4, and forgive me if I don't pronounce this right. I will give it my best shot. Slawomir Fetcher. Tim.
Question's this. Has Shropshire Council submitted a bid to Active Travel Fund Tranche 3, and is it going to submit a bid to Active Travel Fund Tranche 4?
Okay, I'm going to go back to Councillor Ian Nellins as the relevant portfolio holder.
Thank you. In simple terms, no and yes. Shropshire Council did not submit a bid for the Active Travel Fund Tranche 3 due to a lack of staffing and resources at that time. The intention is to submit a bid to all future active travel funds. Thank you.
Thank you. A bit briefer than some of your colleagues earlier. Question 5 from Savar Shirehole has come. Well, Tim, Savar Shirehole. No.
The question from the group is as follows. Number 1, does the council recognise how much Shropshire Council's taxpayers will object to their council spending a quoted £37 million on a new civic hub, when 3 to 5 million on our Shirehole would afford legacy maintenance, energy improvements and cosmetic refreshment? Number 2, as blended office home working unfolds, how can a riverside civic hub with flood risk accommodate the commuting and work-related travel and parking for some 800 Shropshire Council and tenant employees, compared to the county-wide accessibility and space available at the Shirehole? And 3, what carbon impact audit and assessment will be made of A, the demolition of our Shirehole, B, its site redevelopment, and C, a civic hub new build replacement?
Okay, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. At its meeting on the 24th of February this year, this full council formally declared the Shirehole building surplus to requirements and delegated to officers the ability to agree and implement the disposal strategy and agree terms for sale subject to the final approval of full council. The quoted figure of £3 to £5 million to afford legacy improvements is wholly unrealistic and not based in reality. It would do very little to improve the Shirehole in terms of its energy performance, or indeed to carry out critical maintenance and improvements to provide any form of longevity in terms of future use. The original refurbishment scheme agreed by full council was in excess of £20 million, and that did not include the removal of asbestos or current cost inflations in the construction industry. Shirehole has failed technically, functionally, economically, and in its green credentials. The current building fabric and energy output is extremely inefficient and performs significantly below industry standards for heat loss, wasted energy, comfort and daylight. This creates a poor user environment where people are often too hot or too cold with little control over their personal environment. Detailed work was undertaken in terms of feasibility for the refurbishment of the Shirehole and related to the key decisions taken at the council meeting of the 16th of July 2020. In the report, it advised that the Stage 2 financial business case, as prepared by Ryder, Levitt and Bucknell, identified an estimated cost of £24.1 million. This was on the basis of refurbishing the Shirehole, which was presented to full council in December of 2018. Due to inflation and comparable scope of works, this figure is likely now to be in excess of £30 million. We would, of course, be very interested to see an estimate of costs which provides for a functional refurbishment of the Shirehole for the sum of £5 million, together with the projected operational carbon savings that such a refurbishment would be able to provide. And I would add that my email address is always open for such a rigorous report to be sent to me. Notwithstanding the detailed work undertaken previously, the total floor area of the Shirehole equates to circa 20,000 square metres. The council's predicted future requirement is currently set at less than a quarter of that floor space. Incorporating the future likely requirements of partners, the forecast requirement for the planned multi-agency hub in total is just over half of the current floor space of Shirehole. The commitment to move to a town centre site will provide excellent access to transport links with the bus station, train station and park and ride service, together with both existing and future planned car parking provision to match with the council's climate change and movement strategy objectives. In terms of the increasing risks associated with flooding, the redevelopment of the riverside area provides the actual opportunity to address and mitigate the impacts of flooding as part of the next stage of design development. No decisions have been taken in terms of demolition of the current Shirehole building, and the future of the site will be tested through an appropriate marketing process. This will scope the appetite of any third parties who may wish to retain or convert the existing building as opposed to redeveloping the site. And as I said, that decision will be brought back to full council with recommendations in due course. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, that has the public questions dealt with, so we'll move on to other items on the agenda. We will move on to item 8, the constitution of committees and allocation of seats to political groups. The appendix 2 of the report was circulated yesterday evening, so I'm now going to invite the leader to present the report and to move that the report be received and agreed.
I second that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. This is the procedural report that is brought to the council every year. It is populated by the group leaders. I formally recommend the report.
Okay. No hands. Move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So we'll move on to item 9, which is the scheme of delegation. I move the responsibility for functions set out in part 3 of the Constitution and the scheme of delegation set out in part 8 of the Constitution be approved.
I second that.
Okay. Looking round. No hands, no debate. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous? Crikey, at this rate, we'll be finished in 10 minutes. Appointment of the independent persons. I move that the report be received and agreed.
Vice Chairman, I second.
Thank you. No hands. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Appointment of the monitoring officer. Tim, I believe you are going to leave. Oh, he's gone. Crikey. He did that quickly. Okay, I move that Tim Collard, the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance, formerly the Interim Director, be confirmed as the Permanent Monitoring Officer of the Council, commensurate to the recent confirmation of his appointment as Assistant Director.
Someone who remembers Tim Collard as a young solicitor at North Shropshire District Council 20 years ago, I'm very pleased indeed to second this rise to the top of the legal services of this council. I second.
Yes, I think it's well deserved. Okay, anybody wish to say anything? Nope. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous? Does somebody want to leave the room and fetch him back? No. Well, if I make a gaffe, I'll need him. We'll just wait for Tim to come back. Yeah, no. It was unanimous. It wasn't tight, it was unanimous. So well done, Tim. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, the Shropshire Plan. I invite the leader to present the report and move that the report and the recommendations be received and agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Leslie Picton, leader of Shropshire Council. I'm really pleased to be presenting the Shropshire Plan to Council today. I think most of you that know me relatively well will know that I'm not a huge fan of weighty corporate documents, and we were very keen to find a way of presenting our plan for the next 4 years in a way that was as relevant to members, to officers, but most importantly to members of the public. This plan is a key strategic document setting out for the council over the coming years what we're going to be doing. It is effectively a suite of strategic plans and virtual documents that together are more than just a traditional corporate plan. The Shropshire Plan demonstrates our ambition and provides direction for our staff and our resources to deliver the very best outcomes for Shropshire. We are being asked today to approve the strategic plan and the new vision for the council, a vision we can all be passionate about: Shropshire living the best life. or it could be Shropshire living the best life. But it's about Shropshire, and it's about having the best life in Shropshire. With our vision agreed, we can then agree our priorities and strategic objectives. These will shape what gets done. Our plans are milestones, and they will be set out in delivery plans for our 4 priorities, which are healthy people, healthy economy, healthy environment, and healthy organisation. These documents are already in development, ready to be shaped, and will be living documents regularly updated to ensure they reflect what needs to be done with the right measures and targets. We will then start to see these measures reported in scorecards and dashboards that we will be able to review and consider to assess progress and impact without actually waiting for those quarterly reports that come before Cabinet. Our role as members certainly does not end here. It doesn't end with approving the strategic plan and vision. As a council, and with all the different roles it contains, we can use the Shropshire Plan and the delivery plans to help inform decision making and to evaluate and provide a critical friend challenge on progress and impacts. I put the recommendations before council. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded by Gwilym, I believe. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Formally second. I think the leader has said most of what I wanted to say. I reserve my right. Thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Dean, then Councillor Wilde.
Thank you, Councillor Julian Dean from Portsmouth, Shrewsbury. In general, the Green Group recognise that this Shropshire Plan is a big step forward to what was produced by the previous administration with its almost complete lack of targets. But there are things about it that we have concerns about. We still think the way this talks about a healthy economy doesn't get to grips with the opportunities that a community wealth building approach would bring to strengthen a local sustainable green economy through judicious use of our procurement powers and by mobilising the procurement powers of other anchor institutions in the public sector and beyond. We think there is too little identification of the specific gaps in the economy and in the social provision that any plan should address. Top-level targets on public transport, on insulation and decarbonisation of heating to address both the cost of living crisis and the need to decarbonise, on renewable energy, these are there on the Zero Carbon Shropshire branded page, but it's not clear that they act as a so-called golden thread in the way that they should through the rest of the plan. We would also like to see something specific on mobilising the accrued savings of the better off in the county by giving them opportunities to invest in better in the county, perhaps through a green bond or through partnerships with people like Big Solar. There is also very little said about our land and agriculture, but we know that land use needs to be transformed to protect and recover nature, to deliver carbon sequestration, to reduce emissions, and to continue to deliver healthy food. As a largely agricultural county, it is odd that we don't set out a bolder vision for this. I also have some specific concerns about the performance management framework, referring to governance, page 11 of the PMF. Directorate management team set the objectives, KPIs and targets for the directorate. Sitting above this is the impact and progress performance management group. But the role description does not include interrogating and challenging directorate objectives, KPIs and targets. This leaves only the Executive Director of Resources and the CEO with this challenging role within the officer structure. Then there is a level entitled Performance Management Function, which does seem to be about reviewing and adjusting targets, but it isn't defined as a body, just as a function. Who does this? The final version needs to show where this challenge comes from and how transparent it will be. Then there is a law which clumps together members, cabinet and scrutiny members. But there are several different roles here. Cabinet will own the objectives. Scrutiny will want to provide challenge and bring concerns and suggestions to Cabinet, and then audit has its own special role to be the third level check on whether the challenge coming from elsewhere is sufficiently robust. This is not just geekery. If we don't lay this down, directorates may lack accountability for choices of KPIs and targets. Scrutiny will not know who to challenge when it comes to translating Cabinet objectives into targets. Audit will be left without a clear picture of whether targets have been arrived at robustly and have taken a portfolio approach to risk, looking beyond the immediate directorate objectives to the wider and cumulative impact of targets across the council. So I would ask that some work is done on these aspects of governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clare Wilde.
Thank you. How do I follow that? I'm just going to talk briefly. I welcome the Shropshire Plan. I think it's a really exciting time for scrutiny because we are having lots of input, and we will continue to have lots of input into the key performance indicators. We had a presentation the other day at scrutiny, and we will feed in, because I think sometimes the issue I felt in the past was the way we perform in the past perhaps was through the officer's eyes as opposed to the councillor's eyes. So there are key performance indicators that are probably more important to the councillors and the general public. And we're hopefully going to get those indicators added. So I think it's really, really good news for us. And also with the dashboards, when we look at things, we can actually see from day to day what the relevant figures and performance are. So I think it's a huge step forward, and certainly it's been a very open process. Everyone's been engaged. There's been lots of presentations from Tom Dodds. It's going to be the major item on our next scrutiny. I think it's been about 3 times now. So I think it's very exciting, and I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vasma.
Thank you. I'm very disappointed with this plan. It is very weak. I mean, if you look at the beginning of it, the main body of it is about 8 pages long. The rest of it's a list of achievements and nice pictures and things of what have been done. I think there could be far more detailed information about policies that we are supporting. For example, a green economy. Why couldn't that be a heading instead of a healthy economy? It seems to me that there is a lot of generalities here, but there's very little specific information, very little specific policies which we can measure and which the council can look forward to. I mean, the media talked about living the best life, but it's not clear what that best life is going to be from this plan. Also, if you look at the performance management section of this report, the performance management framework, in actual fact, scrutiny has a very limited role as far as I can see. There is very little reference to scrutiny within this document. And I think that scrutiny ought to be actually central to the monitoring of this document in a way which it's not. If you look on page 50 example, there's very little detail about what scrutiny is be doing and what impact it might have. I was quite surprised actually that there was a reference in here to a citizen panel, which I didn't believe the administration was in favour of, but there we go. I think citizen panels are good things, and I very much support them using those. Lastly, I'd just like to say that really, we've got this Shropshire Plan, but in actual fact, we've had a slash in the capital programme from 400 million pounds to 120 million pounds. There's a dramatic change in our capital programme, yet this Shropshire Plan it would not in any way could be judged against that, could not in any way be seen to have an impact or be able to review that in any substantial way. I think this is a very weak document. I think we should be proposing here today that it refers back and get some more detailed policies which can be reviewed and can be actually measured more effectively in a revised document.
Okay, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shropshire Plan, a nice looking document, nice pictures, a lot of nice words, but, and it is a big but. I note the report which accompanies the updated corporate plan, or Shropshire Plan as it is now called. I feel it should be called the Shropshire Council Plan. I note the word communities and high level words appear innumerable times within it. The word rural appears hardly at all. The names of partners even less than that. Can the Cabinet members identify in it whether parish and town councils are mentioned in the document at all? I can't find those words anywhere. Are they now to be ignored? And it seems to me this plan does. Have parish and town councils been informed of this updated high-level Shropshire Council Plan? Has any discussions taken place with these important partners? Partners is referred to, but just the word partners. Community, partners. The plan refers to us councillors. On page 4, it refers to local Shropshire councillors as community leaders. There are, of course, other elected local councillors who turn themselves also as community leaders, unpaid community leaders. And here, of course, I refer to elected parish and town councillors. They are ambassadors, important ambassadors, and I, plus no doubt councillors here today, work with our local parish councillors in partnership. This seems to be totally missing in this strategic, high-level, important document. I will be interested to hear why parish and town councils are not mentioned and why no discussions has taken place with them. At present, due to this, I am unable to support this plan. We need partners, equal partners, to deliver and to make it successful. We need others to ensure they feel involved, to be part of it, not to be told this is the Shropshire Council Plan with strategic objectives and this is what we, the Shropshire Council, are going to achieve with partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, well, Gwilym, I'm going to come back to you. You reserved your right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was quite heavily involved with the development of this Shropshire Plan, working with Leslie over the winter. The first thing to advise you is it did go out for conversation from December right through to the end of January to all partners that we work with, including town and parish councils. And I actually think that the opposition parties here had lost the plot a little bit, because this is a coat hanger document and a golden thread that sits above our whole organisation and will influence everything we do. Everything you've talked about, whether it's environmental issues, whether it's consulting with the town and parish councils, anything you want to talk about will come under the strategic documents that deliver the plan. Now, I'll give you one golden opportunity. Informal Cabinet had was given by Hayley Owen an update on the economic strategy, the review of the economic strategy. That has been to scrutiny twice. It is a key delivery strategy under this plan. Now, when it went to scrutiny twice, cross-party scrutiny, no alterations were made. Nothing came forward from the opposition. That is your opportunity moving forward to make any changes you want to this plan. So I urge you, like Claire said, it's a golden time. Get engaged, go to those scrutiny meetings, and if you want the thing changed, you've got a golden opportunity. I fully support the plan, and I think the way it is written as a top-end document means that our partners and the public can understand our ambitions and where we want to get to. Please support.
Thank you. Leslie, you have the right to reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I welcome some of the comments made by Councillor Julian Dean. We've had this conversation before, and I am a firm believer that we can take a lot of this through scrutiny to get this into these plans. But before I come on to the specifics, one of the things I just want to say is I'm going to take you back to what I said in my introduction. And the words were, our plans and milestones will be set out in delivery plans for our 4 priorities. I then listed the 4 priorities. I then stated these documents are in development, ready to be shaped. This is not a finished document. This is a high-level vision document that all our other documents will sit underneath. It is those documents that will go through to scrutiny, which can be looked at, argued over, suggestions made back to Cabinet, so that we all are involved in this plan. And as for it not going to the town and parish councils, I'm absolutely with Councillor Butler. In fact, I've had 3 meetings with SALC over this very thing alone. So this is not a finished document. What we're asking you today is to approve the strategic framework, to approve the vision. The hard work starts after this. And as for the performance indicators, there are certainly a number of councillors on my left-hand side, admittedly, who are desperate to get detailed key performance indicators that mean something not just to officers, but most importantly, they mean something to the public. I urge you to support this.
Okay, councillors, it's been debated. We have a proposal which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Speaker, I propose that we had a referral back.
Sorry?
Councillor Vasma, I propose that we're a referral back of this document.
Yeah, you need to be a little bit more. To where?
Back to consideration by cabinet.
No, I'm not going to take that. So all those in favour, please show. I think that's substantially in favour of, but just so that people get to wave their hands and stretch their arms. All those against? Consider arms stretched. Any abstentions? 5 abstentions. 6 abstentions, sorry. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 13, Star Housing Management Arrangements. I invite Councillor Dean Carroll to present the report and move that the report and the recommendations be received and agreed.
Thank you very much. So anybody who's familiar with the history of Star Housing will know that certainly over the last 10 years of our relationship with the Almo has been, I'll say generously, a little checkered. However, I think every local councillor that I've spoken to who has been a local member for the past 10 years recognises that there have been significant improvements in the last 5 to 6 years in the provision and the service that Star offer to their tenants. For those of you who aren't familiar with Star Housing, at Shropshire Towns and Rural Housing Association, Shropshire Towns and Rural Housing is an arm's length management organisation of Shropshire Council. It manages the social and affordable housing stock that Shropshire Council retains, which is predominantly located in the former Oswestry Borough and Bridgnorth District Council areas. Over the past 10 years, due to developments across the county, it has added a small number of other properties county-wide, so it's no longer true to say that it is purely located in those areas, but the majority of its residents do live in those 2 areas. I was involved in the midterm review that we did into Star Housing 5 years ago, and if you'd have told me that at the end of the first 10-year period we would be in a position where we would be encouraged by the feedback that we received from Campbell to Kell, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But as I said earlier, the improvements that Star Housing have made to the service they provide to their tenants and in aligning their own strategies with our strategic objectives as a council in delivering for the priorities of the people of Shropshire has been quite phenomenal in the past few years. And we've brought in Campbell to Kell, who are a nationally recognised leader in the social housing sector as consultants, to carry out a thorough review. And as you can see from the options that were considered and the scope of the review, nothing was left off the table in this review. I had certainly a very rigorous, I think it was hour and a half, 20-minute session with one of the reviewers from Campbell to Kell, who was anxious to get under the skin of exactly what we thought of Star Housing and where we viewed our relationship with them in the future. I know the leader and some of my colleagues had similarly robust and rigorous engagements with the lead reviewer, as did representatives of Star Housing. As a result of that review, Campbell to Kell came out with a series of recommendations And we have combined those into the recommendations 3.1, 3.5, which are to go ahead with what is basically option 3 from the review, to extend STAR's management agreement, not by the 5 years that was envisaged in the original terms of the first management agreement, but actually by 10 years, because we believe that the stability that full 10-year term will give will enable greater investment from the housing revenue account and from partners in partners with STAR Housing. So I'm actually very pleased to bring forward this proposed new management agreement, which is for 10 years, which will enable us not just to continue with business as usual, but to grow and develop STAR Housing's remit and our own relationship with STAR Housing, and to continue to explore avenues and opportunities where ourselves and STAR Housing as our arm's length management organisation can combine our resources and combine our priorities to deliver ever increasing better services for the people of Shropshire. I submit this report for consideration.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Mark Jones, is it? Yeah, there he is. Sorry, behind the screen. I didn't see you there. Thank you. Okay, we can run the room. Councillor Jones, I guess you reserved your right of reply. Have you got anything you wish to say? Excellent. Good. Concise and to the point. That's what I like. Councillor Carroll, I'm hoping that you haven't got a long-winded response to the debate.
Let me think on that, Speaker. No.
All right, good. Okay, there are a number of recommendations, 3.1 to 5. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? It's moved unanimously. Thank you very much. Move on to item 14, the temporary accommodation. All right, okay, that's fine. No, all right, well, thanks for letting me know. Item 14, temporary accommodation delivery programme. I invite Councillor Dean Carroll to present the report, move the report and around recommendations be received and agreed. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. This is actually quite a minor amendment to a report that was received and endorsed by full council. I believe it was last September this January. Time's flown quicker than I thought. And at the time, I think council were very supportive of the approach that we were planning to take in acquiring our own additional in-house temporary accommodation units to both ensure a better quality of service for those of our residents who require temporary accommodation and to reduce our reliance on very expensive placements in bed and breakfast and hotels. The minor amendment that we're looking for council's approval for is to enable us to, whilst we're developing larger scale units of multiple units, larger scale installations of multiple units in locations across the county, that we use the time in between to bring forward isolated and more dispersed is the word I'm looking for, dispersed individual 1 and 2 bedroom properties to enable us to make maximum benefit from this approach as soon as possible and not requiring us to wait for the length of time it would take to bring forward major establishments into use. Recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 are there as written. I think the acquisitions could be would be a mixture of both freehold acquisitions and short-term leases as the need in a specific location and the council's requirements dictate. I'm happy to move these recommendations and respond to any questions.
Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor Simon Harris. Thank you. Okay, I've got 2 speakers. Hold on. Just give me a second. Thus far, Ruth Houghton and Nigel Hartin. Ruth?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update on keeping the council informed of this important programme of works. I note the dispersed model of temporary accommodation. I know that this will help to address the housing need. However, I would also urge that the council consider the development of 2-bed units of accommodation wherever possible in order to provide future flexibility. The option of entering into leases with existing open market schemes of self-contained and shared accommodations is a valid way forward. However, how practical is this? Are there such schemes available in Shropshire to be able to enter into leases with? I also welcome the reduction in using less bed and breakfast accommodation. We all know it's not suitable on a long-term basis, but I would make a plea for temporary accommodation in rural areas, which often gets overlooked. The market towns, of course, we need accommodation there, but people living in rural areas are also affected by homelessness, and private rented accommodation, even if it is available, is very expensive. By not having temporary accommodation in more rural areas, employment may be affected through longer travel times and higher travel costs, and in some instances, jobs may be lost. So can Council please give some consideration to a wider purchase and lease of dispersed accommodation? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Harting. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Houghton did cover a couple of the points I was going to raise, so I won't go over those again. Just one other point I'd like to ask the portfolio holder. In terms of the conversion to 1 and 2 bedroom properties, I can't see anything in the report in terms of the space standards that we're going to operate to. Can you perhaps give some information on that, please?
Thank you. Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you. I really welcome this report. I think it demonstrates a real can-do attitude in this particular team. I think we would all agree across the council that we do not want to be wasting money on expensive bed and breakfast. We would all agree across all parties that we need to move to these more sustainable types of temporary accommodation, and what you're seeing here is a team that is keen to get on and get things done, exactly delivering rural dispersal and actually using extra flexibility here to take over private leases but have that controlled quality, which is absolutely necessary for our social tenants. What I want to say is how absolutely urgent and important it is that we facilitate this as soon as possible. I cannot emphasise to you the tidal wave of homelessness that is coming our way. A report yesterday said that homelessness will increase by 1/3 by 2024 because of the dire economic crisis in our country, with inflation at a 30-year high and with the cost of living go through the roof. We are seeing huge increases in evictions. Just yesterday in my own division, I was helping 2 families faced with eviction next month, and at 11 o'clock at night, I was sent Facebook messages from a rough sleeper in my town. I cannot emphasise strongly enough how urgent and important this work is and how much I appreciate the flexible team that are doing everything they can to bring it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Turley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kevin Turley, Shifnal North. I only have one simple question. While we're driving this programme forward, which is a great programme, can we also look at larger properties as well for greater families? With the economy going the way it is, I can see us more and more families are going to need greater support from ourselves. And if we could look at 3-bedroom and bigger properties going forward, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Like everybody else, I welcome this paper coming forward and the flexibility to do whatever we can. The temporary accommodation budget does actually sit within my portfolio and is constantly under pressure, and has been a problem for us moving forward. And whatever we can do, more importantly, to get people into homes, but secondly, to take the pressure off our budgets so we can deliver other services to the people of Shropshire, I warmly welcome. Well done, Dean. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to the seconder who withheld their right, Councillor Simon Harris.
I've nothing to add. It's just encouraging that Dean is making a move on this to make temporary accommodation easier to get into. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. So to rattle through answers to those questions, Ruth, 2-bedroom units are in the proposal on the paper, both 1 and 2-bedroom units. What I would say is that the overwhelming majority of households in temporary accommodation that are in bed and breakfast are 1-bedroom need households, but we will be continuing to look to add 2-bedroom units wherever we possibly can. And in terms of rural temporary accommodation, that is the whole beauty of a dispersed model. It means that we can acquire properties in locations where it just would not be feasible or desirable to place a unit of 8 or 10 properties. Nigel, coming on to the question of space standards. Now, obviously, if we're acquiring an existing property, then we will be fairly constrained by the space standards that were current when it was built. However, if we are to build our own units, which we are, then both Cornovi and Star Housing adopt an approach of delivering above what are national minimum space standards. So I hope you can take some reassurance from that. Julia, I thank you very much for the recognition you showed of the work of the team. This has been a fantastic effort, both by the Housing Services team and by the Assets team, who are providing an awful lot of support and technical knowledge and expertise, and also by Star Housing, who, coming back to the previous item, has shown the benefits of a strong collaborative working relationship with Star Housing. So thank you very much for that. And in terms of the urgency you've raised, that's exactly the point of bringing this paper forward now, asking for this amendment, is because we recognise the need to move urgently and not wait for the delivery of 10 or 12 unit sites. This will give us the ability, this paper will give us the ability to move with urgency. Kev, thank you for your question about larger properties. We do always look at, particularly when we're leasing individual properties, we look at the size requirements we need from households currently in temporary accommodation need. What I would say, coming back to Star Housing on this as well, is we always go to Star Housing first as our close partner to see what availability they have in current void stock that we could make maximum use of. So that is something that we do always take into account. And then coming back to Gwilym, one thing that Gwilym said on the end is absolutely key and absolutely right, which is not necessarily, the most important thing isn't necessarily getting somebody into temporary accommodation, although that is important. The important thing is what happens when they're in temporary accommodation, the support that is wrapped around them. And we've invested in a larger temporary accommodation support team and support worker team to support people who are in temporary accommodation so that they don't need to stay in temporary accommodation, but are ready to move on to permanent tenancies of their own again. And for some people, that's quite a straightforward process, because the reason they've ended up in need of temporary accommodation can be through absolutely no fault of their own. With other people, it can be a complex and weeks or months long process, but we are there for the long term to make sure that we can move people who we have placed into temporary accommodation back out the other side and into stable, settled, permanent accommodation of their own that they are able to sustain. I thank Council for its wide-ranging support for this paper and the approach that we're taking, and I move the recommendations.
Excellent. Well, it's been moved and seconded. There are a couple of recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? No, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to always the most fun bit, notices of motion. Item 15, the following motions have been received in accordance with procedure rules. The following motion has been received from Councillor Rob Wilson, is supported by Councillors Julian Dean, who has seconded, Kate Halliday and Rosemary Dartnell. Transport and Development Supplementary Planning Document. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every year, more and more developments are given planning permission across Shropshire. The vast majority, if not all, are entrenching car dependency. This is clearly evident at Sue South along Otley Road in Shrewsbury, where no attempts have been made to link into or upgrade the existing active travel infrastructure, despite being 10 minutes from the centre of town by cycle. The new Cornovi development on London Road, which has just been granted planning permission, has prioritised cars over pedestrians and cyclists by determining that the brand new shared use path alongside Weir Hill Road will be severed. In Ludlow, the only pedestrian access to a new development of Bromfield is prone to flooding. The new local plan for Worthing doesn't even give any weight to being able to walk safely to school, doctors, pub or the shop. With 30,000 new homes planned to be built in Shropshire by 2038, we cannot afford to continue in this vein. Each time a new development is built, there is the opportunity to do things better than we have done in the past. This council has made policy decisions over the last few years that should help to solve this issue on a cross-party basis by the councillors named in this motion and supported by many in this room. In May 2019, Shropshire Council declared a climate emergency. On the 24th of September 2020, Shropshire Council resolved to support the Prime Minister's gear change policy announcement and to ensure that all cycling infrastructure built in Shropshire conforms to standards laid out in LTM 120. Chapter 14 of LTM 120 is entitled Integrating Cycling with Highways Improvements and New Developments. It's introduced as follows. It's important that cycle infrastructure requirements are embedded into local authority planning, design and highway adoption policies and processes. This will ensure that good quality cycle infrastructure is delivered in all new developments, new highways and highway improvement schemes. At full council on the 25th of February 2021, Shropshire Council resolved that LTP4 would adopt Transport for New Homes principles for responding to development proposals. Where proposals do not meet the high standards against the checklist, they should be rejected. At full council in September 2021, Shropshire Council resolved to proactively reduce the number of short car journeys taken, particularly in our towns, act to discourage cars from town centres and develop low traffic zones, create active travel routes and improve urban public transport. Supplementary planning documents, SPDs, are a material consideration in decision making. It is clear to me that an SPD in this area will give us the teeth needed to make sure that these policy decisions passed the council make their way into the real world. There are other areas too where an SPD could help deliver for our residents, whether on energy efficiency, provision of affordable homes or sustainable drainage. But this motion specifically looks to codify existing council policy on sustainable transport into planning policy. Other councils, for example, Bath and North East Somerset, have already worked on such a document. We wouldn't need to start from scratch, because it will take time to implement an SPD. Immediately, there are steps we could take. We need to ensure that all planning officers have received training on LTM 120 and they understand the power that it provides them. A development in Cambridge was rejected on the basis of not meeting the standards set. We can also ask developers to make a climate change declaration when submitting an application, as Sheffield City Council do. If members don't agree with this motion, they ask, what's your solution? Do nothing is not an option. We need to stop thinking about sustainable transport as optional, as something we would like to do if we had the money or if we had the time. This is a political choice. We need to choose to find the money and choose to find the time. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dean, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, I'll speak now. Thank you very much, Councillor Julian Dean from Port Hill. So helpfully, Councillor Wilson has reminded us of our existing policies, and one of them is that we support the Transport for New Homes principles. So let's just remind ourselves what that means. It means that developments should create an environment that is not dominated by cars or by parking, that will create street scenes that are greener, more child-friendly, and that encourage walking and cycling. This is good for transport emissions, it's good for health, and it's good for building connected communities. It means that residents should be able to reach everyday amenities and services easily without using a car. This contributes to building properly inclusive communities, remembering that not everyone will have access to the car keys. It means that from day one, public transport options for longer journeys should be available and should be publicised. Of course, this is challenging to deliver, but we can still insist that developers actively consider and plan for public transport and develop travel plans for residents that give them options. These principles are simple, they're easy to check against plans, and they actually make very little difference to cost or viability. So not to apply them is purely about doing business as usual, the main enemy of doing things better. Councillor Wilson mentioned the Bath and North Somerset SPD. Has it worked? Well, a development known as Bath Riverside, if that rings any bells, recently won the Best in Class award from the Transport for New Homes team. So, where there's a will, there's a way. KPMG recently reported on this whole issue and highlighted the barriers to doing better. For example, that in many areas the Transport Authority and the Planning Authority lie with different levels of local government. We don't have that barrier. But they also highlighted the opportunities that designing with sustainable transport in mind can result in increased density, in other words, more homes in the best locations, reducing the pressure for sprawl. Will the local plan achieve all this without a supplementary planning document? Well, members were not that keen on the local plan in the first place, as I recall, when the majority very reluctantly adopted it. And often this was due to that threat of sprawl. We've looked at the existing policies and we don't think they provide the detail needed. SPDs can't change the policy, but they can reinforce the message with much clearer expectations given to the developers. And the reason we're proposing a questionnaire from now is that we can make a start with this even under our existing policies. To reject this would be to reject even the possibility of doing better. Let's not do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you very much. I've taken a great deal of interest in this as it covers my portfolio area, and I did meet with the proposers of the motion a couple of weeks ago to talk through some of the aspects of it and to try to explain some of the position where we find ourselves in. Just to address some of the points of the motion, the developments you have identified have been implemented in accordance with the planning permissions granted. However, it is noted the disappointment expressed regarding public and active travel in the delivery of these developments. It recognises that, therefore, the greater focus needs to be placed on ensuring that developments are delivered to provide best practice initiatives towards public and active transport. Shropshire Council is, of course, deeply disappointed with, along with many other rural authorities, that we were unsuccessful with the Shropshire Bus Service Implementation Plan bid, which would have complemented opportunities to improve transport infrastructure through new developments. But we are certainly not giving up on this, and I'm sure this will be covered later in today's meeting. Following the adoption of the local plan, likely to be in early 2023, subject to the outcome of the current examination process, there will be an opportunity to review the ongoing work programme of the planning policy team and to update the local development scheme accordingly. This is likely to include the potential to develop one or more supplementary planning documents to further support the delivery of the policies of the local plan. There is clear value in looking at the potential for an SPD on the theme of sustainable transport, especially if there were to add value to the emerging local transport plan and the Shrewsbury Big Town plan work. However, this needs to be looked at alongside the potential priority needs of other future works. And at this stage, it is felt more appropriate to review the need for the SPD and its timeframe once the local plan has been adopted. It is important to note that we are currently planned that the LTP will run until 2038 to coincide with the local plan. The LTP is being developed using a whole council approach to recognise the key role that transport and highways have to play in maintaining sustainable communities, encouraging economic growth and strengthening links with environmental and health agendas. The LTP will inform a range of more specific policies and strategies that will underpin it, including local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, the LCWIP, and the bus service improvement plan, and any specific Shropshire planning guidance related to transport that will be developed. There is an expectation that developers deliver in accordance with all national guidance. However, the council has begun training on LTN 120 for officers who need to be aware of its requirements, including within planning and highways teams, to ensure that appropriate challenge and adherence is in place. This will continue to be updated in as more clarity on the arrangements and requirements will come forward with collaboration with Active Travel England, and these will become more embedded in the work that we do. It is agreed that the council will reference the points developers the transport of new homes guidance as part of the planning application process and highlight good practice wherever possible. Decisions on planning applications will need to be taken in line with the current development plan in the first instance and take into account other material considerations. The council is working on the 4th local transport plan and will have strong focus on multimodal and sustainable transport solutions use in the county. In parallel, the council is developing its local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which will identify opportunities for new infrastructure to ensure connectivity and access to services, which will feed into the consideration for specific investment, both through bids for funding from government and to mitigate the impact of development, both in the local area and the cumulative impact upon travel. The council supports good practice in plan making and implementation, and where appropriate, we will seek to highlight development schemes which have delivered to this standard. In short, I think we all agree the general thrust of this motion. However, as I've already explained, I cannot support it at this stage for the reasons I've already outlined. It is important that we get the local plan over the line, and at this point we will take into consideration what SPDs will be required to add weight to our newly adopted local plan. Once we are at this stage, I will of course be happy to liaise with members to develop a series of supplementary planning documents. However, I will not be supporting this motion today.
Wow, very well timed. 8 seconds left, well done. Okay, Councillor Rosemary Dartnell.
Thank you. Rosemary Dartnell, Baston Hill, Colham and Sutton. In the South Sustainable Urban Extension, within 5 years from now, Shrewsbury will have outgrown the inner ring road boundary, with housing built in every space out to the A5. The green belt that once surrounded the town from Weir Hill in the east to Mill Brace in the south continues to welcome thousands of new Shrewsbury residents. These new homes, built in Colham and Sutton, are resolutely car dependent, meaning that there is no provision to safely link new residential areas with existing walking and cycling routes, nor, it seems, is there any plan to reroute public transport. Indeed, even worse, public rights of way used for years by existing residents in the area for easy access to the countryside have been closed off for several years at the convenience of developers, causing great inconvenience to many and a loss of important amenity throughout lockdown, and this continues today. In some new estates, there's not even a clear pavement, let alone the government standard safe walking and cycling carriageways that protect active travellers from motor vehicles, and by doing so, encourage their use. This is a missed opportunity of quite remarkable proportion. Well-planned physical infrastructure has the power to integrate new communities into our towns and villages, to blend new areas with their surroundings from day one, providing social links, easy access to local services with valuable benefits to mental and physical well-being, to public health, saving space and critically reducing pollution. What has been built around Shrewsbury is the number of housing estates that access the rest of town almost exclusively by car. We know we must find ways to reduce car use. We must do this to protect the environment and the climate for future generations. The only realistic way to encourage people to leave their cars at home to make the necessary change happen is to provide alternative transport methods that are more convenient, reliable, more pleasant, more fun, more sociable, healthier, cheaper to use. And if you don't believe me, make the time to take your children or your grandchildren, or if you don't have any, borrow some. Take them to school once by car and then walk them there on another day. I stand as guarantor 100% certain that you and they will have more fun on the second trip. This week, the Council received a Bronze Award for carbon literacy education. I very much welcome Councillor Nellin's related comment yesterday in which he recognised the Council has a zone of influence far beyond its carbon reporting requirements, far beyond its own activities with regard to decarbonisation. It is our responsibility. This zone of influence accounts for at least 33% of Shropshire's emissions, but there is little evidence of the Council proactively working for the urgent change that is needed. For instance, the recent ANPR traffic survey was used to assess traffic volume, discover the size, class, fuel type, and emissions of vehicles passing by. Yes, it's important information, but it clearly demonstrates a car-dominated mindset. Contrast this with Herefordshire Council, who is conducting a travel survey that includes a wider view of what constitutes travel. Questions are framed around eliciting a broad picture of residents' travel decisions, asking whether their habits were changed by the pandemic. Importantly, it includes 3 questions that link the understanding of climate change mitigation with travel choices. The survey includes bus use, trains, cycle and walking, as well as car use. For me, this demonstrates that Herefordshire Council is aware of and working towards a modal shift in transport. We can do the same. Now, I get it, change is hard, it's challenging, but change is overdue and we must act. The old adage, actions speak louder than words, applies here. We seem to be waiting for government to provide a framework. I won't talk about that, you'll be pleased to hear, but sadly, this is not forthcoming and we cannot afford to rely on others. Shropshire's planning system must align by forcing developers to accept and embody this change now. Please take a first step.
20 seconds left.
Please take a first step in acknowledging our wider responsibility to act to decarbonise by voting for this motion and the positive change it will bring to all who live in Shropshire.
Thank you. Equally well timed. Thank you. Kate Halliday. Councillor Kate Halliday.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about some of the potential health benefits to this motion. We do have a problem with obesity. In Shropshire, 64.6% of adults are classed either overweight or obese, which is above the national average. And we have worse than average levels of obesity in early pregnancy, higher than average estimated diabetes diagnosis rates for people over 17. And there's a whole range of other health issues that can come along with that. And I think probably for this reason, healthy weight and physical activity are a key focus in Shropshire's health and wellbeing strategy 21 to 25. And I noticed, or rather my computer noticed, that health is mentioned 91 times in the Shropshire Plan that we've just been looking at. It's a key objective of this council to improve health. It's not just about wellbeing benefits, there's a massive economic benefit to addressing health. Obesity is estimated to cost the NHS about 6.1 billion. The cost of council-funded community-based social care for a severely obese person is nearly double the cost of somebody who has a healthy BMI. And there's much greater, wider costs to the economy in terms of productivity, days off sick. In Shropshire, there were 6,419 hospital admissions. That's 18 a day, where obesity was a primary or secondary factor. And we know the problems of hospital admissions. Not all of those will have gone into an ambulance, but quite a few people will be turning up every day in an ambulance, and we're having terrible problems with ambulance and service in Shropshire at the moment. That figure is increasing each year. More and more people are going into hospital because of obesity-related issues. So, preventing and reducing obesity would result in large-scale savings for the NHS and the local authority. And as we know, physical inactivity is a major contributor to being overweight and obese. So, providing good active travel routes will help reduce the problems with obesity and being overweight. And I'll just give a mention to mental health as well, because there's lots of links between good mental health and activity. Currently in Shropshire we have 4,000 children with mental health disorder, and staff report increases in admissions into hospital because of mental health issues. So I'd just also like to talk, I've talked about the Shropshire Plan, but we've recently in the council adopted a health in all policies approach in Shropshire, which I was extremely pleased to see. And the Director of Public Health's report recognises that increasing active travel through walking and cycling as a way of reducing the risks of obesity had multiple benefits. So this is a kind of key strategic point for Shropshire Council. This motion offers a cost-effective and practical way of addressing some of this. I'd like to remind members that we've already spent, as Councillor Carroll has discussed, over £3 million on surveys and designs for a short section of road. What this is talking about is probably, I imagine, in the low tens of thousands in terms of officer time. So I would urge people to support this motion. And finally, we've been talking about cost of living. If we let people walk and cycle to work, to hospital, to GP surgeries, there will be that will be supporting people not to have to spend money on fuel. And so I would urge members to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note the Cabinet member's response to this to say that he could not agree to it and not to back it. Disappointed. If one looks at the opening sentence on this, full council in May 2019, Shropshire Council declared a climate emergency. When is an emergency an emergency? Certainly not as far as this is concerned. We've got a chance here to start to do something now, not to delay until after the new local plan is adopted. When it's adopted, a year away. There are hearings in July to see whether the preparation for the local plan has complied with all current legislation. Have to see how that goes. But here we're putting delay, delay, delay. Why? We need to do things now. As I said, point one, climate emergency, we need to start to take action now, not in 2022, 23, 24. We heard a report yesterday which said about the amount of carbon that was burnt in the last year and the way we're going to the 1.5 degrees centigrade increase. And here we are, almost like Rome, watching it burn. We need to do something. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rob Macy and Councillor Julia Buckley, and then I am minded to start drawing a line under the debate and go back to Councillor Wilson. But we do have 6 other motions, all equally as important and wanting to have their time in the air. So, Councillor Rob Macy.
Thank you, Speaker. I think looking at the subject we're talking about, obviously the last few years has been a renewed focus on this, and the government has also applied that renewed focus, and there's new members of this council. I think in my mind, I would agree there were 2 opportunities to look at this. The one was in the preparation of the plan that's currently being examined, at which point we did have cross-party groups, we did have lots of consultation and various Regulation 18 exercises and so on. I think if some of this obviously has come as a result of government moving since, there has been progress by the council, but I think that would have been the first opportunity had it been at the stage it is now, and had been pushed for by others. I think now, given the timescales, we're halfway through 2022, the documents are with the examination. Personally, I'd probably agree with the portfolio holder that the focus of the planning policy team should be on making sure that their focus is on the examination, making sure that we've got a sound plan, we've got a healthy land supply. The biggest risk would be to lose focus on this and the examination of the plan, which would put a lot more at risk. So I think from that point of view and from the offers that the portfolio holders made around, once that is in place, we look at how we strengthen it. It would also be interesting to look at what feedback comes throughout the examination process. as to what may need to feed into that. So I am in agreement with that. And I think just in closing, one of the easy ways to pick up one of the points in this motion is we did introduce the Design and Heritage Awards for developments in Shropshire. Whether there is one around sustainable transport specifically as a category, that is one of the ways that could immediately be picked up. But I just think in policy terms, the approach outlined by the portfolio holder does make sense at this point to complete the examination and then bring together all the work that's gone on into one place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you. I think that we've got some really detailed and compelling arguments here from the proposers. And although it is mildly disappointing to hear the response from the portfolio holder, I actually hear a much more positive response. If I've correctly understood, I hear both from Councillor Potter and Councillor Macy. I hear that you agree in principle with the content of this, but just not the timing. As I say in my family, right thing, wrong time. And if perhaps again I've misunderstood, as I understand it, even if we were to agree this today, it can't yet be attached to a plan which is going through the process. So none of these changes could happen until the plan is adopted. And given that that's the majority of housing and development that will come forward, that will be the thing that has the most impact. So I would like to welcome your comments, Councillor Potter, and I would like to reach out to you and propose a friendly amendment that I'd like you to consider. Could we look at inserting a few words at line 2? This council resolves upon the adoption of the local plan to instruct the executive. So all the same actions upon which we all agree, but to insert the words which reflect your own words, both of you, around the appropriate timing. And I hope that you would consider this as a friendly motion upon which we can all agree, but right thing, right time.
Okay, so you've proposed an amendment. Well, I can hear voices. They're not just my usual ones.
From my point of view, in terms of an amendment, I think we would look to something along the lines of, on the completion and the adoption of the local plan, we will instruct officers to explore the opportunities around a Pacific SPD potentially, rather than instruct.
Claire, I can see your hand. I just want to gauge what the reaction is over here, because we're kind of not doing this in the usual way, but perhaps in a more positive way.
I was going to try and be helpful, Mr.
Right.
Chairman, and move Councillor Potter's motion.
Right. Good Lord, these things are complicated enough anyway. Now we've got amendments to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a problem with Councillor Potter's amendment. I think that's what we tried to do with 3 of the resolutions. When we spoke to Councillor Potter, he was concerned about putting too much pressure on the planning policy team, and we tried to correct that by saying, following the adoption of the local plan, if that needs a slightly different set of words as Councillor Potter has proposed, then I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Potter. Are you happy to, well, first of all, I'm going to go back to Councillor Potter to see if he's happy to insert that as after the local plan.
I think that our main thing is we will explore all these options after the adoption of the local plan. I'm not making any cast iron commitments, but it's certainly something that will be on our agenda. So if that covers off the points, I'm just trying to see what I'm agreeing to further down. Yeah, it's explore everything.
All right, so that's to no commitment, but to positively explore that after the adoption of the local plan to be inserted into that clause. Are you happy and content with that? Rosemary, I don't really want to open it up as a debate again. Thanks. I'm going to ask Julia, and then I'm going to go back to Rob, and then I will look for a seconder for the proposed amendment, which everybody seems to be happy with, and then vote on that becoming substantive should that be successful. Are you happy with that?
Just clarity, so we're inserting the additional words at point 2, but retaining everything else, in which case I'm very happy, and I thank Councillor Potter for his engagement.
Okay, you happy with that? Good. Rob? Are you happy with that amendment?
Yes.
Right. So is your amendment seconded?
Oh, I'll second it.
Councillor Wild, I think Councillor Wild seconded.
Yeah, she did.
Oh,
she proposed it actually, but you'd already said it.
Yeah.
So, okay, it's been the amendment, and I'm not going to go through it again because I got myself lost some 10 minutes ago. Is there that be inserted into clause 2 and that the rest of it stand? So all those in favour of the amendment, please show. Good. Any against? Any abstentions? So the amendment now becomes substantive. All of those in favour of the substantive, please show. Good. Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. Wow. Let's hope the other 6 aren't like that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, councillors. That is council working at its best, frankly. So, okay. The second motion that we've got is being received from Councillor Duncan Kerr and is supported by the Green Group, Government's Democracy and the Committee System. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, well, we're on to a good thing. See if we can get this unanimous as well, we'll see. Anyway, what I've done in the motion is, first of all, just to set out the history of how we came to have a cabinet system. For anybody who's not aware, it was the Labour government back in the 1990s that mandated the death of the committee system and denied councils the right to choose that, and the coalition government in, I think, 2012, which restored autonomy to councils and enabled them to choose the method of decision making that they and their public and their partners preferred. The reason for bringing this now is that with all the levelling up issues and the need to bid for funding, you'll read the guidance there. It does put a strong emphasis on local leadership supported by local communities. And it does occur to me that we've had this cabinet system since 2012. And if anybody asks, and how do you know this cabinet system is supported by your local community? I don't know what the answer would be. So the motion doesn't say, and I hope we don't have a debate over, is it good to have a committee system or is it not bad to have a committee system? All the motion seeks to do is to do a review, and that review can then come back to council. If you look around, a number of councils are doing just this. You'll know last week that Bristol, and this was actually the Conservative, the Green Group and the Lib Dem group working together, actually went to a referendum where the current mayoral system was thrown out to be replaced by a committee system. Sheffield has voted to have a committee system as well. Liverpool is out to consultation. And if you want to look at some of the county councils, some of the Conservative controlled county councils, they went back to committee system very early on. So right across the political spectrum, people are looking at different systems. So I would say whatever you, and actually ought to just add to this that we of course have some experience of continuing to run a committee system because development control was operated as a committee system. You might have your own views on how that operates, but I think generally people have a high degree of respect for how the Development Control Committee has operated. So I would say whatever your views on the merits of one system over another, now is the time to do some proper consideration, do some consultation with public and partners, and then make an informed decision. That way we not only secure a method of working which has the support of local population and the understanding of our local people, but we're in the strongest position to achieve additional resources, be it from levelling up or for any other programme, which requires us to demonstrate that the particular form of operation and leadership we've adopted is one that's supported by our local community and not just one that we in this room think works best. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it says seconded or supported by the Green Group by Julian. I take it you're seconding?
I'll second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
You want to reserve your right. Okay. Oh, Leslie, sorry.
I'll put that on. Thank you, Councillor Kerr, for your insight. I have to admit, I was a bit confused at one point because did I actually hear you rightly say that the Labour Party got it wrong in 2000 and actually that the Conservatives got it right in 2011? Because if that's the case, I'm certainly going to chalk that one up. I'm also aware, you did, I think. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, chalk that one up, guys.
Yes.
I'm also aware that this motion is doing the rounds of a number of councils. It's being promoted by the Green Group and also by the Liberal Democrat Group across a number of councils. And it's interesting to note how many of parties who promised to introduce a committee system, when they took control of councils, are actually dragging their feet in doing so. The Boundary Review Working Group, and I suppose this is a bit like, for me, it's a bit like the last motion. The amount of work that the Boundary Review Working Group has got to do with both the divisional review and with a community governance review is huge. If we're going to do this properly, this would significantly add to the time frame, and it will also, in my view, muddy the waters. I have experience of working in a committee system, as do other members in this chamber, as do other councillors across the country. In my experience and that of others in this chamber, it makes decision making substantially slower. It actually diffuses accountability amongst committees. It certainly doesn't make it clearer to the public who is responsible and accountable for what. Budgetary control is more difficult, and there has been serious issues with this because spending commitments can be made by individual committees with absolutely no reference to other committees. Members and officers, I can guarantee you, will spend a significant amount more time in the chamber, and in many committees' case, in council's case, where they've actually gone to this system, they've had to employ more staff to service those committees. And at a time when our resources are so limited, that is not a good idea. It's also time consuming, and any claims that this system provides greater democracy and transparency is a nonsense, because committee style governance is most often used in councils where there is either a very, very small majority or no overall control. If that took place in this council, all the committees would be chaired by the administration. All the committees would be vice-chaired by this administration, and the majority of members on those committees would be the administration. Now, I can see that on my left, they're all thinking, yeah, what's wrong with that? But actually, from the opposition's point of view, it's always been an issue because very often these committee systems do not have scrutiny committees. So whilst your involvement in all these committees might be perhaps more involved than in scrutiny, you wouldn't have, in fact, I think you'd have less say. It's a backward step in my view. The administration has promised and pledged to strengthen scrutiny, and we've promised to provide more opportunities to get members involved in policy discussions at an early stage. We will continue to welcome members and members of the public to any and all of our meetings. This administration has absolutely no intention of wasting precious time and changing the current system of governance, and therefore we will not be supporting this motion. Thank you very much.
Councillor David Vasmer.
Yes, Councillor David Vasmer, Underdale. Yes, I'm old enough to have been on authority which had a committee system before reorganisation, and I believe that if you have a committee system, you have much more engagement of councillors. Let me put it this way, if anybody's been to Cabinet, you'll know that there's very little debate at Cabinet. There's very little important, myself are able to make statements and other councillors can make statements at different times, but you're not able to take part in a real debate. On a committee system, you're much more likely to have a real debate about the issues coming up at that committee. Yes, it does require more staffing, but I think it results in being more open debate, more real debate, as opposed to the very stilted debates we have at the moment. We don't have a functioning scrutiny system here because all the chairs and vice chairs are all members of the Conservative Party. There is no real debate. It's clearly very difficult for ordinary members to engage properly and engage on issues which are coming up. And I think that this motion should be supported. One criticism I have I think, is that there needs to be an emphasis on scrutiny. There needs to be a committee which is a scrutiny committee in a committee system. I think that's quite important, just as if you have in the House of Commons, you have various committees which actually monitor the operations of the government. So I think it's important to have that in addition to in tradition, the committees on education or housing or whatever. I support this and hope that we can have a more open debate, which I think commissioning system which would actually produce.
Thank you. Councillor Rosemary Dartnell.
Thank you. I'd just like to comment on Councillor Picton's opening remarks. She was very pleased to notice that, according to some, the Labour government got it wrong in 2000 and then the Conservatives got it right. But then she spoke passionately in support of the Labour position.
Good. No doubt that's added to the debate that we're having, but there you go. Okay, I haven't got any. Oh, right. In at the last minute, Councillor Nigel Hartin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm also one of those members that can remember actually operating within the committee system, and it certainly had its merits. I have to say that the system of cabinet and scrutiny started out quite well, and certainly when it was started running, it was working very effectively, primarily I think because scrutiny was of course at that time chaired by the opposition and not as currently is the case by the administration. And I think that has been an issue that's writ large over the problems that we've had within scrutiny for the last number of years. I've got nothing against this particular proposal, though I think investigating anything to see whether or not there are benefits in moving back to a situation that we had previously is not in itself a problem. I take on board what the other leader of the council says in terms of perhaps the widening of the governance, the boundary review working group to include governance at this stage is perhaps piling on more work than is necessary for that particular group. But intrinsically, I've got nothing against this particular motion, because it is after all only an investigative proposal, and it's not something that we are proposing as a council to do. All we're doing is we're asking for a little bit of work to be done to investigate how it could, whether there are any benefits that might flow from that. And of course we have, as has been pointed out by the proposer, Councillor Kerr, the evidence that's coming forward from other councils that are currently undertaking similar work. So therefore there shouldn't necessarily be a significant amount of work on the part of this council. So I think on balance I would support this.
Thank you. Well, I'm now going to go back to Councillor Julian Dean, who reserved his right.
Thank you very much, Chair. 4 points I'd like to make. First of all, the boundary review actually already requires some thought about governance. So I think the idea that we should also think about the structure of our governance is not onerous. It seems to me to be a perfectly sensible thing to be doing. The second point is that modern committee systems do or can include scrutiny, so there's no reason why that shouldn't be involved. The third point I want to make is just to note that the defence of the existing system, it's a shame not to hear from some backbenchers in the Conservative Party. In a way, this is all about empowering you as much as anybody else. The defence has only come from the leader of the cabinet, surprisingly enough. Finally, a quote from the Maidstone review, where the conclusions regarding the cabinet system might sound familiar. It was clear from all the sources of evidence that many members feel disengaged and uninvolved with the present system. Cabinet was seen by some to be autocratic, and there was a lack of member involvement prior to decisions being made. It's that we are asking to be considered, to give all members, backbench members of all parties, more involvement in the decision-making process, and thereby to improve the decision-making process.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, you have the right to come back.
Yeah, thank you. Inevitably, perhaps we descend into the merits or the demerits of various systems, whilst the motion was asking us just to put that to a formal review. But nevertheless, that's what perhaps was inevitable in this consideration. In terms of the comments from the leader, yes, I am happily to criticise the Labour government for dictating options and denying autonomy to local councils. I criticise any government for that. If you look around, there's Conservatives who, as I know in Bristol, who have strongly advocated a committee system. There's Conservative councils work in committee systems. So this isn't a party political thing. Different parties are going in different directions on this. What they've all been prepared to do, though, is to do a proper review. And once a decade, because it's a decade since we were set up, seems a perfectly appropriate time to just say, is the way we conduct our business, is the way we're making decisions, is that the best way from our opinion, but more importantly, is that the best way from the public's opinion and those of our partners that we have to work with? And that's just not some academic exercise for ourselves. The government's very clearly saying to us, if you want to secure funding for levelling up, and in future, increasingly our funding will be discretionary funding for which we have to apply, you need to demonstrate exemplary methods of governance. And one of those is that you've at least consulted people, and they may all say, governance system's great, we like the governance system, keep it. I'm only asking you to consult them. If they say that, and that echoes what the leader said, then we'd be in a much stronger position to get those resources. If they don't, we don't do that exercise, then we're down one peg when it comes to comparing ourselves with other authorities and major authorities who have got significant additional resources, if we're honest about it. The cities are doing quite well at the moment, and they're the ones who are prepared to take the bold step of actually asking people about whether the methodology they use for making decisions works for their communities. And that's what this is about, not about ourselves, whether we're the leader or backbencher or opposition or whatever we are. Does it work for our communities? So I'd urge you to think again. I think this won't go away. I think if you slam the door on this one now, it will come back to bite you at some time in the future. So I'd urge you once again to consider supporting the motion and just doing a review.
Okay. So it has been proposed and seconded, the motion, that the council resolve to widen the brief of the boundary review working group. All those in favour, please show. All those against? I think that is that motion has fallen. Okay, thank you. So we will move on to the third motion. The following motion has been received from Councillor Julian Dean and is supported by the Green Group, Energy Strategy and Warmer Homes. Councillor Dean.
Thank you very much. Councillor Julian Dean from Port Hill. Even before Russia invaded Ukraine, many of our residents were dealing with fuel poverty. Age UK estimated 23,000 or 17% of Shropshire households were in this situation in September. Even before the invasion, prices were rising, but with the added pressure from the war, price increases led to bills rising by 54% in April. And everyone knows a further frightening increase will happen in September. We know what the medium-term solution to this is: insulate our homes. This is the most significant thing we can do, both to address fuel price-induced poverty and to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. The Russian oligarchs have known for some time that the greatest threat to their power is European energy efficiency and investment in renewable energy production. But the recent energy security strategy completely failed to meet the challenge. No new funds were allocated to insulation. No restrictions on planning were lifted to enable rapid development of the cheapest and quickest renewable energy source, onshore wind. Instead, we had jam tomorrow promises of new nuclear, which is expensive, takes too long to address the fuel crisis, let alone the climate crisis, and does little for energy security, given the need to source raw materials from unstable parts of the world and the security risks surrounding nuclear waste. Meanwhile, energy companies are profiteering from the fuel poverty, but the government won't take the hugely popular step of imposing a windfall tax that could be used to relieve that poverty. So what can we do to support the people of Shropshire facing this crisis? We can add our voice to calls for a better approach from government, both to relax planning to enable more development of turbines and the consequent potential income to communities and to farmers. We can add our voice to calls for much more support for insulation. These are the sensible policies being followed by many of our neighbouring countries. Ireland, for example, with Greens in the coalition, now has a carbon tax ring-fenced to pay for insulating and retrofitting homes. We can steer our emerging economic strategy to ensure we maximise opportunities for renewable energy generation. Yes, we do well in producing energy from farm waste, but we could be doing so much more with rooftop solar, with solar farms and even with wind, where we can find communities prepared to not just put up with, but actually invest and earn from their installation, as is happening elsewhere. We can ensure we have the officer capacity to make the most of the meagre opportunities that are coming through in various schemes from government on affordable warmth. Cabinet recently recognised the need for this, so it would be great to get reassurance that this has been done. This should allow us to strengthen our partnership with people like the Marches Energy Agency, who are doing fantastic work to support householders in need, and householders who can pay to insulate and convert away from oil and gas. We can set clear targets to start and work with other social housing providers to ramp up efforts to retrofit social housing. We should recognise that this is an opportunity to make an impact on levels of poverty and of the knock-on of health, mental health, education and social effects that come from cold and expensive to heat homes, whilst also developing a local industry based on skilled, well-paid work that improves the local housing stock. So I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Good. And who is that seconded by? Thank you very much, Julia Evans. Are you going to reserve your right? You're going to
I'll
speak
reserve
now?
my right to speak. Thank you.
I can't see any hands. Ah, yes, I can now see a little group of hands coming up. Okay, we'll start with Simon Harris.
No, sorry, actually, Chair, that wasn't a hand. It was just to identify that my neighbour Edward Bird actually had his hand up.
All right. We see when you put your hand up, I naturally think you want to speak.
No, I
so
do
putting your
understand
hand up on behalf of somebody else confused me. Ed Bird.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Edward Bird, Shifnal South in Cosford. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I think everyone in the room recognises that there is a serious issue with inflation, prices going up. To my mind, these are caused by the economy being effectively shut down, supply being limited, demand still exists. We now have a war in Ukraine, which has affected the global energy prices. There are other measures that we could take, for example, fracking, to reduce the cost of oil and gas. You mentioned the carbon tax. That would in fact that's increased bills to consumers. Adding additional tax to my mind, the best. I'm in a minority, probably even within my own party, as it's not government policy currently. But I think the best way to help people would be to reduce taxation, reduce VAT, get rid of energy taxes, even just temporarily for energy taxes during this particular period of time. So I have to disagree with virtually everything that's been said. I don't think that will really solve the main issue, which I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few others now. Councillor Nigel Hartin, then Councillor Rob Wilson, then Councillor Ian Bellins. Councillor Hartin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hartin, Clone Division. Yes, I'm very much. I think this is a perfectly sensible and very well timed motion on behalf of the Green Group. I think particularly looking at the resolutions proposed, I think particularly pleased to see the proposal to move forward with the rapid development of the retrofit industry, because one of the concerns I think I have at the moment about the amount of development that's being brought forward, not just in this county, but right the way across the country, is the limited nature of insulation, the limited nature of energy efficiency standards and so on. We're building a problem for ourselves for the future. In fact, I think in this area, the only company I think that's building to at least reasonable standards is Cornovi. I think it's important that we take some steps now in order to try and see if we can improve things for the future. We are building up a huge problem for our future with some of the development that's going on at the moment. So I'm fully in support of this. I think it's It's well timed and should be supported.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Wilson.
Thank you. The Met Office published a report this week saying that we now only have a 50% chance of reaching 1.5 degrees of warming by 2026. This is the crucial limit that was set by the Paris Climate Agreement. This threshold is seen as vital for limiting the worst impacts of global warming on people and ecosystems. Just a few years ago, the Met Office only rated the chance of this occurring at 10%. Last month, a major report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that there are still pathways where emissions fall enough to stay under 1.5 degrees of warming. Where that conclusion can be squared with a new study depends on the uncertainty of the models. However, the IPCC report did acknowledge that those pathways only give a 50% chance of staying under 1.5 degrees. This council has recognised its own operations, the impact of its own operations on climate, and is taking action to mitigate those. It has also recognised that this is a relatively small amount in comparison to the impact it can have within its sphere of influence in the county. The carbon impact of 30,000 new homes as envisaged by the draft local plan are an order of magnitude higher than those proposed by the North West Road around Shrewsbury. We think about 30,000 new homes and the climate impact of those new homes, it's a huge, huge amount. And every year, more and more get built. And if we're not building to the right standards, then we're storing up a problem for the future. This is a major issue that the council must grapple with, and I think this motion will be a positive step to making that happen. So I would urge you to support Councillor Dean's motion.
Okay, Councillor Ian Nellins.
Thanks, Councillor Ian Nellins. I thank Councillor Dean for raising this, as it gives me the opportunity to give examples of some of the ongoing work on the points raised, and it indicates that progress and plans aren't already being well and fully communicated. That's why, with Councillor Dean's help, we are establishing a climate change board to which all groups have been invited to nominate a rep, and to date all groups less than Lib Dems have responded, and no doubt they will soon. Fuel poverty is recognised as a significant and growing challenge in Shropshire. Recent increases in transport and home energy prices are expected to significantly increase the proportion of households in Shropshire which will be classed as being in fuel poverty, particularly during the coming winter. As a rural authority with service deliveries responsibilities across a large geography, this change has a number of significant implications for Shropshire Council. Such things as adverse impact on energy costs of our own premises, adverse impact on the ability to recruit and retain staff on lower pay scales where extensive travel is required for that role, adverse impact on the viability of existing contracts involved in extensive travel, and increase in demand for social care and support services from households in fuel poverty. Shropshire Council is already working closely with Zero Carbon Shropshire, the Marches Energy Academy and local social housing providers to make helpful and authoritative community advice on home energy available to households in the county. Shropshire Council's Affordable Warmth team and energy efficiency team also plays a leading role in designing and implementing government-funded programmes to retrofit housing with installation and energy efficiency measures, as reported back in February. Council officers have recently raised concerns with the Department for Business, Energy and Industry Strategy, BEIS, regarding the limited availability of signal to support the installation of smart meters in rural areas. Unless resolved, this will restrict the ability for rural households in fuel poverty to access the cheapest energy tariffs. A new climate change and carbon reduction board will be established shortly to provide strategic direction in the important agenda and receive quarterly updates on progress with the wide range of projects and initiatives which form part of the Council's Climate Action Plan. In addition to these activities, Shropshire Council is engaged in a range of projects and initiatives which are designed to address the issues. To give examples of some of the points raised, on the first point in paragraph 11, the economic development potential of energy generation in green growth will be recognised as part of the economic growth strategy for Shropshire. More detail will be provided in the action plan and support energy with the EG strategy, but also emerging investment plan. The Marches Growth Hub in Shropshire is actively supporting business to access information to grant funding and support investment in energy efficiency. Shropshire Council is leading by example through the development of the 2 megawatt solar farm at Maesbury, Oswestry. Shropshire Council already generates around 1 megawatt of power from building mounted solar arrays on council property. The Climate Task Force is also working closely with Zero Carbon Shropshire, Share Energy and Shropshire Chamber of Trade and small federation businesses to assemble data and provide Cool Shropshire projects, which will provide free business advice to small businesses. Shropshire Council on the second point, addressing warmer homes and supply chain issues. Shropshire Council is working with the Economic Task Force and local further education and higher education providers to provide enhanced opportunities for relevant training skills, and also working with the University and Evora Edge in this capacity as well. On the third item, bringing further funds to improve energy efficiency. The Council's Affordable Warmth team will be applying for the next round of sustainable warmth funding, which is due to open for bids in the autumn. We have previous bids successful, and the other bids that will be applied for along with other authorities in the spring and autumn of this year. Strengthen the Affordable Warmth and Energy Efficiency team. The Affordable Warmth and Energy team is currently recruiting 2 new temporary posts. On the fifth one, providing access, information and advice. The Climate Task Force is working closely with Zero Carbon Shropshire to provide accessible public information about home energy efficiency, including easy wins and short videos showcasing the improvements made by homeowners. Item 6, working in partnership with other agencies. The Council's Affordable Warmth team is working with Herefordshire, Telford and Wrekin, as well as local national agencies such as Citizens Advice, Age UK, Zero Carbon Shropshire and other community agencies in the area. And finally, improving energy and efficiency decarbonisation. The Affordable Warmth team has recently been successful in leading a consortium bid for Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. This consists of 5 registered social landlords and who have properties in the region. The scheme runs until March 23 and will result in over £6 million investment to 249 homes in the Marches. Although we want to work to end fuel poverty, I don't think we need to join the End Fuel Poverty Coalition. There's more work to be done.
20 seconds left.
There's more work to be done, and we will continue to vamp up where we can. Thanks.
Well done, thank you. I know the speaker's clock on there is not working, which is why I blurted it out a bit louder, because obviously you can't see it, but we have been timing it on here. Okay. Julie Evans, you reserved your right.
I just want to say as a small thing, when I speak to trades and tradespeople, many of them have no idea about retrofitting. Now in Oxfordshire, they have the Cosy Homes Oxfordshire website, which is a one-stop shop for everybody. So homeowners who want to retrofit, tradespeople who have the skills and knowledge to come together and join, and they have advisors as well for homeowners who go out and advise people. Now, we need something like this because ground level, there's very little knowledge about this from trades, from homeowners who want to. So could we have a look at doing something like that, a one-stop shop for everybody with the information to fly the flag for the Shropshire Council? If we're doing so much, we need to shout about it. So, but please back the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julian, I'm going to Julian Dean, Councillor Julian Dean, coming back to you as the original proposer.
Thank you very much. I'm a little bit. I welcome Councillor Mellon's remarks, and I'm confused as to why he feels, I'm assuming, that the need not to vote for the motion, perhaps just on joining a coalition which is against fuel poverty, which seems a very odd thing to reject. But I welcome all the news that he's shared with us today, and in particular the fact that there is going to be a climate action performance board. But I agree with the comments made by Councillor Wilson, but I would point out to people that, even if there wasn't a climate emergency, we would still want warmer homes. We would still want to insulate so that people don't have to pay so much for bills. We would still be needing to deal with this with the cost of living crisis that we're facing. So on that basis, I think that we should be taking further action, which is why we brought this motion. And finally, I think the people of Shifnal South and Cosford will be very interested to know that their councillor is actually not in favour of insulating homes or energy efficiency, but wants fracking in their area. I'm sure they'll look forward to that. I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have the motion, we've had the debate. All those in favour of supporting the motion, please show. Thank you. All those against? That motion has fallen. Thank you. So, the smile appeared on my face this morning because on my agenda it says this motion is likely to be deferred due to illness. It isn't going to be deferred, so the smile is still there, but not for the same reason. It was going to be from Councillor Tracy Huffer and seconded by Councillor Heather Kidd, both of whom are not well. So who is proposing it now? Ruth Houghton. Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This motion is an important one for all of us in Shropshire councillors. The level of ambulance delays and transfers at our local hospitals are not improving. It's extremely concerning, and I'm going to set out some of the reasons why I think, or I'd hope, that this council will support this motion. So we all know and hear daily about ambulance response times and delays of transfers of care at SAF, and this is happening nationally and locally, and I'm sure everyone in this room has examples from their own division. It's of serious concern. In particular at SAF, I've seen myself ambulances outside stacked up, more than 10 at a time, doors open, people being cared for in a car park with the ambulance doors open. This really isn't acceptable. There are reports in the national and local press around concerns from medical professionals of how the care of individuals is being compromised. Residents in Shropshire report being worried and frightened that should they need an ambulance, that one may not arrive in time to save their lives or to deliver the treatment that they need. I'd like to remind councillors that in the West Midlands Ambulance Service, they continue to miss the NHS target. And if I to remind you of that target, the target is of reaching people who dial 999 with a category 2 condition, such as a stroke or heart attack. The target is to get to them within 18 minutes. That really is impossible for some of our very rural areas, and those people are put at risk. And I would challenge whether that's even possible within some of our market towns, given the condition and state of our ambulance service currently. So this proposed motion of an inquiry into the service that we're receiving is really critical, and it applies to every one of us and to every person in Shropshire that we represent. So I'd really urge Council to consider and adopt this motion so that we can at least deliver better health services to the people that we are representing here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is being seconded by Councillor Bentinck. Okay, right. I'm going to bring Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, can I reserve my right to speak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have asked you. I had assumed you were going to. So, and please, when you do speak, if you could just pop your mask down, it does make it easier for folks. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Dean Carroll. I think you're going to propose an amendment. Let's see. Let's deal with this. And
thank you, Speaker. Yes, indeed. The amendment should have been circulated in advance, but for the avoidance of doubt, we're proposing to delete paragraph 7 and replace with this council resolves to establish a task and finish group to consider the feasibility of an inquiry into ambulance delays. There's a couple of important reasons why we're proposing such a change. The first one is that an ad hoc working group we don't believe is the right or appropriate avenue from which to consider an inquiry. Rather, we feel that it should be done within the proper structures of the council, which would be via a task and finish group that then can report back to cabinet or full council on a formal basis. The other thing is that we need to establish who are the right bodies to form an inquiry. Is that for Shropshire Council to do? Is that for NHS England, NHS Improvement, local NHS partners? Inquiries need to deliver tangible outcomes. And are we as a council the best placed to lead on that inquiry, or should we be supporting it? What I would say in terms of improving standards of healthcare, including ambulance waiting times and delays at hospital is that we are already very active within the existing structures, both with HOSC, the Health Overview Scrutiny Committee, joint HOSC, our health and wellbeing boards, and through the ICS. We have already arranged meetings with our counterparts in Telford and Wrekin, and we did recently have meetings with our counterparts in Powys, who were also affected by things such as delayed transfers from ambulances into hospitals in our NHS system. But also like to acknowledge and put on record as an administration our thanks to our Conservative members of Parliament who have facilitated finally the visit of a health minister to Shropshire to see firsthand the challenges that we are facing across the entire system of the Shropshire Health Service. And that is part of a long-standing, ongoing conversation we've been having with the Department for Health and also with DLUC about funding for the health services in Shropshire, but also about funding for our own social services and social care departments. So as I've said, the reason for this amendment is to try and put the framing of an inquiry and the investigation into the inquiry into a formal and proper structure within the council. So I hope that that can be accepted by the mover. Thank you.
Okay, I am looking at Councillor Ruth Houghton. Is that something that you would be prepared to accept that amendment?
Well, Chair, I note the comment that a task and finish group is a recognised structure and reporting structure of the council, but in some ways the amendment is to consider the feasibility of an inquiry. So are you sort of looking at having an inquiry as to see if we should have an inquiry? And then when you look at the terms of reference of what a task and finish group might look at, are they not those items B, C and D on the motion? On my screen has just disappeared, which is to set draft objectives in terms of reference, to identify the organisations from which members of the inquiry would be drawn, which Councillor Carroll mentioned, and to report its findings to Cabinet. And I would hope that somehow between us we could come to an arrangement that incorporates a task and finish group with agreeing its aims and objectives and agreeing which member organisations should be a part of.
Right.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear everything that Councillor Houghton was saying. I apologise. I did gather that Councillor Houghton maybe feels that the wording of the amendment doesn't carry with it the emphasis of the original proposals. However, what I would say is that wider than looking purely at the original proposals, the idea of feasibility to consider the feasibility of an inquiry is to also establish whether Shropshire Council are the organisation that should be leading such an inquiry. I think it's to take it back a step further.
Do excuse me doing a bit of horse trading here, councillors, but I think if we can get an outcome that's acceptable to everybody and then the motion passes, I think that's a lot better than it not passing. So that's why I'm doing this. Councillor Houghton.
If we could agree to a task and finish group with the B, C and D of the motion, so that we actually agree the terms of reference and the objectives and identify the organisations and report its findings to Cabinet.
No,
and I do feel that Shropshire Council should be leading this. We are the people who represent our communities, and it is the people in our communities who are being affected.
Right. Okay, thank you. It looks like that we're going to have to debate the amendment, I think, because there is copious of head shaking. We've not come to an agreement on that, so we are talking about the amendment. Is there anybody that wishes to talk to the amendment? Councillor Bentic, you may also wish to speak now, because it may well be that we don't get back to the original. Yep. I will check and second.
Yep, Councillor Allcroft, Market Drayton East. I have to say I'm a bit fed up of hearing about an ambulance service crisis. And I think it's a political move to gain emotion from the public. This problem basically is an inability of the Integrated Care Board, CCG, members, mainly the Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals, to admit patients. It's not about the availability of ambulances or the training of the staff or their communications or anything else. And I really do get fed up of the knocking of the ambulance service. This is an issue, again, which comes through PRH and Shrewsbury Hospital Trust. Staffing problems, lack of staff bed blocks and all that type of thing. We don't talk about that. We talk about response times of ambulances, which they have no control of if they are stuck at our hospital for, as was described in a press article yesterday, I think 23 hours. You know, so it's not an ambulance service crisis. And in that, the problem lies within SAF. And I'm of the opinion that it's a hospital's issue that needs to be sorted. Yes, it needs to be sorted as well on the social services side. And I frankly think that the best idea would be to have somebody in, yes, the feasibility study, but we must have somebody in from the Department of Health involved in this. Terms of management, Future Fit has shown that local health and council authorities don't always work together well, and I feel that the management expertise of the Department of Health would be extremely helpful in this on this issue. So, yeah. So I think the Department of Health have got to be involved with this issue, not just local health authorities and so forth. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I didn't make it clear at the beginning. It's my assumption that, Leslie, you're seconding this, all right? You're going to withhold or hold your right? Okay. So I've got councillors Bentic, Buckley, and then Evans. Councillor Bentic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, council members, members of the public, the failure to achieve national ambulance response and transfer times is a 21st century phenomenon, not the 20th century. There's been a 6 to 7% year-on-year increase in people seen by Shropshire's emergency services in recent years. And this is one of the major issues. There were 13,000 emergency responses in the last year from the Meal Ambulance Depot, more recently called a hub, a completely inappropriate site within a dense population and with two major schools for 2,350 students on the route from the hub to attend emergencies in Shropshire. In a 24-hour period in March 2022, 500 emergencies were seen by the two A&E departments in Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals, which must be a record. And there are an inadequate number of inpatient beds to admit those who require it. In 2012, 100 Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital inpatient beds were closed in a savage cost-cutting exercise due to austerity measures, only partially restored by the modular ward in the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital, due to be commissioned in April of this year. There are large numbers of patients medically fit for discharge, but remaining in hospital due either to the lack of a discharge care package or components of it, and 20% of inpatients require such a package, or no bed in the community to accept them. Many of Shropshire care homes are currently closed to new admissions as they struggle to cope with staff vacancies. Indeed, this has been estimated at 105,000 in England during the recent debate on the Health and Care Act 2022. This means there are almost no community care beds to which these medically fit patients can be discharged. Ambulance handover delays of greater than 30 minutes at Shrewsbury and Telford have increased from 22% in 2017-18 to nearly 52% in 2021, compared with 21% for England as a whole. Indeed, for the month to the 3rd of April 2022, it was 72% handover delays. Every day in Shropshire, about a half of all ambulances on shift are unable to respond to incidents, as they are queuing, waiting to hand over patients to hospitals. And I have witnessed up to 17 at the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital at any one time. Patients are left for hours waiting for ambulances with serious and life-threatening medical emergencies. There has been a 77% increase in serious incidents reported by doctors and paramedics compared with the pre-pandemic figures in relation to ambulance services. I'm delighted to hear that the Health Minister, Edward Arger, will visit Shropshire to personally observe this dreadful collapse in emergency services. And he has confirmed a review into Shropshire's health crisis by the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin Integrated Care Board. Accordingly, I urge members to vote for this motion to ensure that the proposed inquiry is fit for purpose and leads to effective solution, as the Ockenden inquiry did, following years of other completely ineffective inquiries and investigations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Julia Buckley. Julia.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree with Councillor Roy Oldcroft. I was a bit upset to hear that you feel we are politicising the discussion of ambulance times, which have put people's lives at risk. I think everybody in this room knows of somebody who's been affected across all parties, and there has been a cross-party concern and campaign to investigate the issue, get to the bottom of it, and try to work out how we can best help. And I guess that's what's behind today's request for an inquiry. So the Conservatives are sending a minister, Liberal Democrats MP are asking for inquiry, and all parties today are asking that Shropshire Council do what we can. That's not political. I quite honestly say I'm probably one of the most political people in this room, but when it comes to saving lives in ambulances, I don't think there's any place for party politics. And there's something else I'd like to say. A couple of weeks ago, I had a cross-party meeting, myself, a Liberal Democrat, a local campaigner, and Mr Doherty from the West Midlands Ambulance Services to discuss the issues we have in Shropshire, particularly about the ambulance response times. And the first 2 hours of a 3-hour discussion mirrored exactly the comments that you've made and that Councillor Carroll has made and that we've just heard from Councillor Bentig. The idea that the main cause of the problem is the handover delays at the hospitals, which leads to the queue of ambulances behaving like wards rather than behaving like ambulances. But we kept asking the same question. It took 2 hours to shift the debate. The question is this: if everybody experiences the same problem of the handover delays at Shrewsbury and Telford, and if the target time for category 1 is a 9-minute response, why is it that even this week and this month, the average response time for Shrewsbury postcodes is 7 minutes? For Bridge North it's 13, for Oswestry it's 18, for Whitchurch it's 21, and for Church Stretton it's 38. And the answer is because we are all subjected to the handover delays. That is a constant thing that affects everybody the same. The thing that affects us differentially with variance is your geographic location. The rural peripheries are worse affected because the ambulance is not sighted 9 minutes away. So even when you have released the ambulance from Shrewsbury, it does not return to a place which is 9 minutes from any patient. And in the end, Mr. Doherty agreed. I said to him, can you recognise that 2 years ago, the target was 9 minutes? And even then, in Bridgnorth, we perhaps had 10 or 11, which we accepted. But now that has doubled. And in Church Stretton, it has quadrupled, so exponentially increased, but only in those areas furthest away. And he said, yes, you are the collateral damage of the ambulance service structure. It was always the case. It would take longer for an ambulance to get to the rurals, but when it was within the targets, it was tolerable. 38 minutes is not tolerable. We have to stop normalising that and pretending that handovers at hospitals affect everybody equally. They do not. So if there's any political point to make here, it's that the problem is the rural dispersion of the ambulances, which never get back to a location which could ever serve 9 minutes. And the third hour of that meeting, Mr. Doherty, he agreed with us. And we said, do you agree if the ambulances could be dispersed back to the periphery that we'd have a better chance? He said, of course. Of course, if we can unlock the problem at the hospitals, if we can unlock the handover delays, if we can release the queue of 17 ambulances, of course, we would like to rurally disperse them. We asked him to put out a press statement on the day to say that, and he did. So can we please get past the headlines, which is the handover delays at hospitals, which affect everybody equally, and can we drill down to the more serious issue? The people in this room, we represent the residents of Shropshire. And if you represent a division which has a response time of more than double the target, I ask you to see beyond political parties and to speak up and get involved in this inquiry. I ask that any task and finish have representatives from rural areas to drill down to the most serious part of this problem. And it is our job to expose it and talk about it.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't meant to stop you in full flow. Just give you a bit of a heads up, that's all. Okay. Roger Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm amazed. Maybe I shouldn't be. I've been around the block a few times and I've heard people kick things into the long grass a few times. In Shropshire, we have a problem. Yesterday, I quoted some response times in London, which they said were out of the norm. Let them come to Shropshire and see what we have here. We need, on behalf of our residents, our electors, to improve response times. Whether it's ambulance, hospital, whichever. Read point 2 in the motion. It says, set up an inquiry to get answers from the hospital trust, the ambulance trust, the CCG and others. We need to establish and to improve now, not do a feasibility whether an inquiry is appropriate or not. I had a 96-year-old neighbour who had a Ford, and I presume we can all quote cases like this, 96 years old. He had a Ford. 14 hours later, the ambulance came, identified he'd broken his hip, went into hospital. 14 days later, I went to his funeral. Is that good enough? 14 hours for a 96-year-old who's had a Ford. The hospital people the ambulance people who attended apologised for the delay and said it wouldn't happen. It shouldn't have. Whether it was the ambulance or whoever, I don't care. There is a problem. We should be looking at it now, not looking into consider the feasibility of an inquiry. We have residents at home around us who are now suffering. We need to do something now. Show that Shropshire Council is interested, is going to do something, and will do it. A task and finish group, and I heard the word set up the procedures for it. Task and finish group meets in secret. Under the rules, we invite people in and then ask them to leave. Is that how we want to start this off? We need to be open, identify the problem and get it sorted, not start looking at the feasibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor David Vasmer, and then I'm going to go back to Councillor Ruth Houghton to sum up on what she's heard about the amendment to the original motion. Councillor Vasmer.
Thank you. Councillor Dean Carroll, I respect you a great deal, but proposing effectively an inquiry into an inquiry, I think, is one of the most inventive ways of kicking an issue into long grass. We must actually do something about this. The people out there are very, very concerned about this. As Councillor Evans has just described, situations like that happen all the time. We cannot go back to people and say, oh, we're working on an inquiry into this and to see what we can do. We must actually take action now. And the motion that we have before us would actually establish a proper inquiry and to drill down, as Councillor Buckley said, into some of the issues which are causing the problem. This is a real issue in Shropshire, a lot of concern about it, and I really call upon Conservative members to think how you are going to respond to your constituents when they come to you about the issues they face of having not had a proper response from ambulance services. What are you going to say? Oh, I called for an inquiry into an inquiry.
Thank you. Okay, Ruth, just before I come back to you, I had forgotten that Leslie had reserved her right in seconding. So Leslie.
Thank
then
you.
Ruth.
I must admit, I find
This isn't a right reply. She reserved her right as a seconder.
Yeah, I'm replying.
But thank you for your coaching, Roger. It's much appreciated.
I'm actually quite shocked by some of the comments that you've made today, because this is not an attempt to stick something in the long grass. This is actually about drilling down into who is the right people to be holding this inquiry. I think we need to remember that SAF is not just a Shropshire Council issue. SAF is a Powys issue. SAF is a Telford and Wrekin issue. And I am quite cross about this, because the opposition certainly seem to think that Shropshire Council are doing nothing. The Chief Executive and I are in regular contact and having meetings at an extremely high level with our counterparts in Telford and Wrekin and our counterparts in Powys to have these very discussions. There's nobody in this room that doesn't want to sort out what is going on with our hospitals. And as Julia said, every one of us will have a tale where somebody has waited, and it doesn't matter what the reason is that they've waited. It doesn't matter whether it's an ambulance being stuck at the RSH or the PRH. It doesn't matter if it's an ambulance that takes longer to get to Market Drayton than it does to Church Stretton. The current system is not working, but are we the right authority to be holding that inquiry? Why we asked for a task and finish, and I don't care if it's a task and finish group, it can be a cross-party working group, but are we the right authority? An inquiry an inquiry can be extremely expensive. What is that inquiry going to tell us? The inquiry is going to tell us that the health system isn't working. Well, hang on a minute. I think we already know that. What we need is action. We need to be talking about it. I don't want to bring people in from outside. I want the health minister to be at the PRH. I want him to be at the RSH. And I want us to be there, saying to people, this is not good enough for Shropshire. Having an inquiry, bringing in people from outside, what's that going to achieve? How much will that cost? We need action now. We need to be having those conversations at the top table. We've got the perfect opportunity of doing that through the ICS. The Minister has already guaranteed he's going to set up an inquiry through the ICS. What makes Shropshire Council think that we are the right people to be doing that. Do we care? Yes, we care. And we will show our constituents we care, but we're not going to do it by talking about it at an inquiry. So the reason for the amendment is to say, let somebody look at it really quickly. Who are the best people to be taking this forward? Is it Shropshire Council? Is it Shropshire Council, Telford and Wrekin? Is it Shropshire Council, Wrekin, Telford and Powys? Let's have a look at who is the right people to take this forward, because otherwise we'll be sitting here in 6 months and we'll be having exactly the same conversation. And I, for one, am not willing to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Houghton.
Well, for that. There we are. Thank you for all the comments, actually, and actually, Leslie, for your compassion and passionate approach to this. Personally, I do know how hard, particularly adult social care, work with health colleagues, and we are not assuming that Shropshire Council isn't doing anything at all. And I don't think that's fair to say that. Councillor Allcroft, this is not an issue to gain emotion. This is about the reality that's happening to people that we are representing. Examples of 14 hours, 7 hours, overnight waits for ambulances are not enough. And it is a complex issue, as is set out in the motion. It recognises that it requires all partners, and it is a complex issue to be addressed. We need to move this forward. I don't agree with the task and finish group. If that is the way to get it through, then I would concede on that. But I do think the points that are in the motion around how an inquiry might operate, the draft objectives and who should be involved could be included in that feasibility being undertaken by a task and finish group. What I can't do is let this go and nothing happen. Councillor Buckley, thank you for your summary and the details of your recent discussions with West Midlands Ambulance Services. I would hope that that would lead to changes, but it is a cross-stakeholder issue. It does include Powys, it does include Telford and Wrekin, it includes ourselves, and it includes the hospitals. So we must move this forward. And I do urge councillors to really think about how their residents, how the people they represent would view this and what they would want to happen. And I move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, now, it was a while ago that we had the amendment. I am going to go back to Councillor Carroll, not for a summing up or anything else, but to say specifically what the amendment is that we will then vote on. So this is not a comeback. This is just I want members to be clear about exactly what we're voting on.
Okay, I can be clear and disciplined. The amendment that we have tabled is that this council resolves to establish a task and finish group to consider the feasibility of an inquiry into ambulance delays. If it is of help to the move of the original motion, I'm quite happy to incorporate to report its findings to Cabinet.
Right, so that's the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show.
Can I call for a recorded vote?
No, I've already started the vote, sorry. All those against? Any abstentions? One. So that motion, that amendment to the motion is carried. That now becomes a substantive. So all of those in favour, please show.
Can I call for a recorded vote, please, Mr. Speaker?
Good Lord, who's asking for that?
Councillor Basma.
You need 15 people. Well, I didn't ask you to, but by all means do, Roger. I can see you at last. Apart from a little hand in the air. I'm not sure there is 15. Right, don't sneak hands up now just because you're a bit short. That was 13, so that won't be a recorded vote. Is that correct, Tim? Okay. So The motion is now substantive. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? Well, it's clearly passed. Okay, good. Thank you. We got there in the end. We will move on to the item 5, which is from Councillor Rosemary Dartnell. Bless you. You all better? Good. I think we also need to phones and computers add noisy food, because there's been plenty of squeaking and nibbling going on. Right. Following motion's been received from Councillor Rosemary Dartnell, been seconded by Councillor, well, I'll come to that. Rosemary, Shropshire Public Transport. No. I didn't spot that. I haven't touched it. Has somebody left their microphone on somewhere?
Oh, it's green.
I'm not sure
Thank
if
you.
we can have a look at that, because I don't really want to be sharing the same one between every single councillor.
Thank you very much. I'm a member for Bayston Hill, Colham and Sutton. Many Arriva bus services, until recently commercially viable, are under notice, and Shropshire's bid for the bus service improvement plan was rejected by government. Of the threatened Arriva bus services, some are now being subsidised by Shropshire Council in the short term. Some face cancellation and some have been combined into other routes. Beyond September, the future remains uncertain. Commercial providers have the right to run or cancel any commercially viable service because the council does not have full control of public transport. Shropshire's bus service is failing us, failing our residents. This failure is happening before our eyes at the very moment we need an effective integrated public transport system designed to drive down the number of car journeys in Shropshire. We have an outdated bus network and it is under threat. Of course, there are problems. Passenger numbers have not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels. Fuel costs have increased and there is a shortage of drivers. Could this grave situation get any worse? Well, sadly, I have to report that yes, it is getting worse. My division has 2 threatened bus services. One has been summarily removed and half replaced with a rerouted service. Passengers have received very little information about such an important change. There is no posting of new timetables at bus stops. That's little to know. The Arriva app is of limited use, not updated in real time, and there are no staff at the bus stations. The services simply don't arrive, leaving passengers stranded, and for how long? They don't know. If this sounds familiar, then you will know from your own inbox just how many Shropshire residents are exasperated by and suffering because of our failed bus services. This is hardly a plan to improve passenger numbers. We must act now. The failure of Shropshire Council's BSIP bid is a matter of great regret. A positive result would have given Shropshire residents the benefit of an upgraded system for our towns, villages and rural areas, redesigning featuring responsive services, integrated connections to our trains and town bus routes. A bus service for the 21st century, delivering positive change, but alas, it will not to be. We now need a plan B to help Shropshire folk get to work, to school, to appointments. If that's not enough pressure, public transport represents the single largest opportunity for driving down car use by offering a reliable, convenient and cheaper choice, one that will encourage those who own a car to leave it at home. We must do this if we are to have any hope of achieving our zero carbon ambitions, our solemn commitment to decarbonise. So today we must address a desperate short-term urgency for those who have had their transport lifeline removed or threatened, but also a pressing obligation to mitigate for the climate crisis. When public transport fails, as with any service, reduced provision in response to reduced demand leads rapidly to an ever-declining system. In this case, with inbuilt inequality, potentially leaving residents isolated or increasing car dependency. Our bus system is now on such a downward spiral, and we must work to avoid a failure of leadership. We must head off that downward spiral, deal with the immediate problems, but set a course now to rectify the medium and long term. There's only one way to do that, to develop a one public transport vision for Shropshire and apply for franchise powers that put the council in control of scoping, maintaining and improving public transport, treating it as a keystone policy in the battle against impending climate breakdown. So I ask the council to resolve to recognise the uncertain future of the threatened Arriva bus services and bring them into house. 2, acknowledge that developing and maintaining a robust policy for an integrated public transport vision combined with an active travel network is our
30 seconds left.
Only route to transport decarbonising in Shropshire. Apply immediately to government for franchising powers and apply for each and every BSIP electric bus and associated funding round announced by government, as well as each and every active travel grant. But keep the franchise plan on track, meanwhile, to ensure our bus services thrive in the medium to long term.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I understand that's being seconded by Councillor Caroline Bagnall.
That's right, yes.
Are you going to speak now, or are you going to reserve?
I reserve my right, please.
Righty-ho.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Dan Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I've taken a keen interest in this subject. One of the bus services that was taken back in-house temporarily by Shropshire Council is the 546 bus service from Pulverbatch to Shrewsbury. So I took some time to have a look at the bus usage figures on that and noted that there's been a drop in about 38% of people currently use it, less people using it than were pre-COVID. So COVID obviously has had a big impact on bus usage, and I guess you know, as a council we have more to do to encourage people to get back into using buses post-COVID. I also note that DFT have said that in urban areas at least 70% of people have now recovered and gone back in. So as a big rural constituency that Shropshire is, there is still more work to be done there. I understand that a lot of bus services have barely recovered to 50% of use. Also, falling fare income, drivers going to HGV and increasing fuel prices all have a significant impact on these bus services, particularly in the rural areas. So I'm pleased to note that there is a members briefing session on the 26th of May that aims to pull together a cross-party working group, as I'm told. I also note that Councillor Motley and the team, James Willocks and the team, were bitterly disappointed with the fund application, and they've responded quickly and at pace, meeting other ministers along with parliamentary representation. So I think they are we have the right people in charge of getting taking the bus service back into you know, making it fit for future post-COVID. So I take a look at the resolution in front of me, and I note that a lot of these points were dealt with at Cabinet back in April. Point 1 says recognise the future of threatened Arriva bus services remaining uncertain. Well, the council's already done that by taking these services back in and supporting them. The motion talks about a one public transport vision. Nowhere in the motion does it explain what that is. And you know, personally, I'm not going to vote for something that I don't know what it is, what it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. It's just basically, it's a vague word, almost like a word salad. It's difficult to understand. It mentions franchise opportunity. You know, I'm just a simple country boy, and when I think of franchises, I think of McDonald's. I don't think of you know, franchise opportunities in you know, council and bus services. So I took a chance to sort of have a look and looked at Cornwall. Now, Cornwall's a sort of a very rural patch in the same way that Shropshire is. And I know that they did that. It took a lot longer than 12 to 18 months to get a plan together to get it done. And I sort of a recent transport-focused bus passenger survey of 31 local authorities. Cornwall ranked 27th out of 31 for value for money. So the franchise is not a panacea. I mean, I agree it's something to look at, but it is not something that we should sort of blindly sort of wander into, I guess. And finally, you know, point 4 on the resolution, the council, as far as I'm aware, has applied for a lot of funding and will continue to do that. So I won't be supporting this motion, and you know, I firmly believe that Councillor Motley, who I have a lot of respect for, is the right person to sort of be leading our sort of charge towards making sure that our bus services are fit for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got a number of speakers who indicated. I've got Councillors Schofield, Motley, Hartin and Weil. So Councillor Chris Schofield first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I represent Oswestry East, and I see the buses as I walk into town most days, and they're just going round in a circle with nobody on them. And it does need a rethink, a massive rethink. But as for this climate emergency, I'm a great believer in to do it sustainably, and to use this weapon all the time and say that, oh, what will your constituents think, as Julia Dean did to Councillor Ed Bird earlier on. Well, you can tell all my constituents, because I knock on a lot of doors and most people have had enough of this nonsense, to be quite frank, because of the cost of emergency living. People are struggling. This is the last thing they're really interested in at the moment. And for buses to go around in circles, which are going to be electric, I take it soon, to demonise the car user for the hinterland of Oswestry, I believe, is a mistake. Because they will be electric cars, so by definition, they will be decarbonising anyway. So that's my view on this.
Thank you. Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you, Chairman, very much. And I'd like to thank Councillor Dartnell for her peroration, I think is the word. But it is, to use another phrase, a slight curate's egg, this. Some of these things I think will work, some of them won't. And you'll remember that the curate, when asked, was your egg nice, curate, said it was nice in parts. And I think this set of motions is slightly the same, and I'll sort of go through it a bit just to try it and give my reasonings for this. We have a commercial arrangement with Arriva. The idea that we just suddenly bring them in-house now actually is not a runner, because we have a contract with them. We need to renegotiate that contract as and when it comes up. It is coming up quite soon for renewal, and that is the time where we need to sit down and actually work out what we want Arriva to do for us. So I think that needs to be borne in mind. We certainly are working very hard to develop and maintain a robust policy. The one public transport vision, you can call it whatever you want. James Willocks and I have spent an awful lot of time working away on this. We did, as members will be aware, put forward an extremely comprehensive and high quality, I have to say, application to the BSIP. That was thrown out, but in a way it was actually perversely something of an advantage to us to have it thrown out, because it meant that if we'd been given any money at all, the government could have come back to us and said, well, I don't know what you're moaning about. You asked for 98 million and we've given you 4, which has happened to some other local authorities. So in a way, we can start with a completely clean sheet. And what we're doing is we are modifying our BSIP, and we are putting it back in for consideration at the next levelling up bid, which is happening in July, and which we were strongly advised to go for by none other than the Transport Minister herself. One of our MPs very kindly arranged for us to meet and talk to her, and she gave us some very useful hints and tips. She said, for goodness sake, go for levelling up. She said, don't get into franchising at this moment. She said, franchising tends to be a good solution for very urban transport systems, but not for very mixed transport systems, such as you have in a large rural county like Shropshire. She said, go for your negotiations through the enhanced partnership, which we have set up. That was one of the requirements if we wanted to go for the levelling up or BSIP funds in the first place. So we are taking advice from the top here, and we're preparing that bid as we speak. At the same time, we're really keen to have our all-member briefing session. We can have as many sessions of this as members feel they like, but we're setting it up for the 26th of May at 2 o'clock. We hope you will all join in on Teams. From there, we want a cross-party working group so that we can actually devise what Councillor Dartnell has termed as a one public transport vision, although it may not end up with that name. I think what the other offer that we've made to the Transport Minister is that Shropshire would like to be a pilot for developing a completely integrated public transport system in a large rural county. Nobody's done this before. She was very attracted by that idea. So that's how we're going to base our next bid. So please don't think we've been sitting doing nothing. We're working really hard on this. As to applying for BSIP electric bus and associated funding rounds, we do it all the time, I can assure you. We've put in an awful lot of bids. We don't let one pass us by. So with all due respect to everybody, and I note my time is drawing to a close, I would ask members not to accept or pass this particular motion, because I think this is a work in progress. You need to let us get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Harting.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harting, Clon Division. Thank you very much, Cecilia, for your comments there. I think, as you said, there are parts of this motion that potentially are good, and I'm particularly pleased to see, for example, that Councillor Nellins pointed out that we are now bidding for round 4 of the active travel grants, and so that's something which we are doing. It's disappointing that perhaps we couldn't have bid for the round 3, but never mind. But I'm just wondering, I think we're probably all trying to get in the same direction, if you will. We're all disappointed that our bus back bid failed. It was very extremely disappointing at the time, but perhaps as Cecilia points out, it might have been sort of something that probably we're better off now that we have an opportunity to look again at the situation. I'm just wondering whether there is any way that perhaps we can incorporate some of the good bits here and move forward with it in a way that we can all express support within the council, rather than just either voting one way or the other. Whether or not perhaps there is a way that we can adopt some of the proposals in here and make a way forward that we could all agree on.
Councillor Claire Wild.
Thank you, Chairman.
Celia,
I'll be brief.
Sorry, just Celia, will you turn your microphone off? That's what causes the issues. Thank you.
So I do have concerns about discussing what could be a commercially sensitive item in an open forum like this, because we are talking about contracts and possible contract changes, and also the people who are employed by this company. At the time when people are struggling and worrying about food and heating, and we're talking about their jobs in the council chamber. And the last thing I want to say is that whenever you do these things, if there's a shuffle, you can almost guarantee that the stuff shuffles towards the urban area and away from the, it shuffles towards the urban area, and the rural areas will get a poorer service. So I'm dead against the motion, and I think we ought to vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Burley Bentick next, and then I'm going to come back to you, Caroline Bagnall, who reserved your right. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a point about the empty buses. There seems to be now a polarization between those who think the COVID-19 pandemic is over and seem to be behaving in the same way as they did before the pandemic, and those who still think that COVID-19 is a serious problem. And so I have the statistics from the government on UK infections reported 9th of May 2022. And so there were 102,000 infections.
Could we keep it?
It is relevant,
well,
Chairman.
Maybe by the skin of its teeth, just in a different parallel universe.
So
be quick,
well,
please.
It's the universe of those who do or don't use the bus, Mr. Chairman. And what I'm going to say is that part of the reason that people are not using buses still is that there is a fear still of catching COVID-19 because of other users who are not using masks. This is an FFP2 mask, which protects against over 90% of transmitted infections of COVID-19. And there are those who are not using the bus because others are not using masks. And so I would ask for any decisions about bus usage to wait until the pandemic is truly over. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Caroline Bagnall.
Thank you. We were talking earlier on about active travel, and in my area, which is Broseley, we've had active travel imposed upon us by Arriva because we don't get buses to Shrewsbury. If we want to come to Shrewsbury on the bus, we have to walk to Much Wenlock or to Ironbridge. Now, to get to Much Wenlock, that's more than 3 miles. We walk along a road that does not have a pavement. It's not lit. It's a winding, narrow road, and it's dangerous. That road also has to be negotiated by young people who are wanting to travel to Shrewsbury to go to college, and many people who have to go to work there. We're not served by the current system, and I believe that it needs to be looked at very, very carefully, and that the franchise system could well mean that the service to the rural areas of Shropshire improves. We deserve to be able to get to places without having to use our cars. If we're going to improve our carbon footprint, we've got to get people out of their cars and onto public transport. And the only way of doing that in the rural areas is by improving the service that is offered to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rosemary Dartnell. Right of reply.
Thank you very much. I welcome comments from other members, or most of them anyway. Thank you, Councillor Morris, for your notes. I agree totally with you that, as also Councillor Bentinck has pointed out, passenger numbers are not returned after the pandemic, or at this stage in the pandemic, perhaps we should best say. And it does rely on us in part, but other aspects of the bus, the bus operators themselves to change that situation, and I guess it will over time. The question about one transport vision, it's in inverted commas in the motion. You might understand it better as a 3-word slogan, something like "Get Brexit Done." It's a government expression, and it's required by the DfT. So it does describe a real new vision for transport in any area that applies for franchising, and it's a prerequisite for a successful application. It's also a one transport vision is something like what was already proposed by the council in the BSIP bid. So it's not a strange thing. It's something that we would have to fulfil. As far as Councillor Schofield's comments are concerned, I'm not a demoniser of car users, and I'm sure that many people are not too. There is a climate emergency, and I sincerely and urgently nominate that he should be the next candidate for carbon literacy training. The council's bronze award for such training stands under threat, I think, at the moment. I very, very much welcome Councillor Motley's work, hers and the officer's work on public transport. And the reason I put this motion is a real concern that public transport will fall behind in Shropshire. We're in a grave situation, and we have to stop that in some way. I'm aware that there's a briefing coming up, which is a good thing, and that there will be a cross-party working group, and that's also, of course, a good thing. And that is it. I hope that members will vote for this. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that's been a good debate, members. We've been told why we should vote for, and we've been told why we shouldn't. So all of those in favour of supporting this motion, please show. Those against? Okay, that's clearly and against. That motion has fallen. We'll move on to the next motion, which is being received from Councillor Bernie Bentinck and is supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Bentinck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The decade of austerity, starting in 2009-10, resulted in 10 years of stagnation of NHS funding, the lowest of the G7 countries and at 10% of GDP. Clinical and other services were forced to take an annual budget cut of 3%, called cost improvement, to fund favoured developments. Some services lost up to 26% of their budget. However, NHS activity increased significantly during this decade, with patient admissions increasing by almost 30%. Consequently, in Shropshire, the Cinderella specialties of maternity, care of the elderly, emergency services and mental health withered due to progressive funding cuts in real terms and serious failings of senior management. It is no surprise that these are the services which are now failing, with mass staff resignations and early retirements seen over the last few years, as the pressures, workload, workplace aggression and external public criticism for those remaining becomes intolerable. An interim report by the Ockenden inquiry in December 2020 described details of the first 250 cases examined, listing 27 local actions for learning for SAF. They say that they've implemented all of these, but have we checked? Shropshire's A&E services have withered over the last decade, with cuts in funding and dreadful recruitment and retention issues. Up to very recently, there has been a chronic severe shortage in the numbers of decision-making clinical staff for the number of patients seen. In a single day, as I reported earlier, there were 500 patients seen in Shropshire's A&E departments, a third of whom attended the new Shrewsbury same-day emergency centre. There's been a 6 to 7% year-on-year increase in emergency attendances over the last 5 years. 20% of SAF inpatients need complex discharge care packages, which many wait for while being medically fit for discharge. These are responsible in part for problems of discharge of patients which manifest as ambulance transfer delays, as there are no SAF beds to admit new, often severely unwell patients. The ambulance response times are a 21st century problem. SAF figures showed that there were 3,800 lost hours in the last 6 months. In a 6-month period in 2021 in the 2 Shropshire hospitals, and there are daily reports of patients waiting for hours with serious and life-threatening emergencies. Since 2021, Shropshire Clinical Commissioning Group has advertised a radical experiment in the delivery of primary care services, but very little of this has come to the Council's attention. Few of these crucially important issues, apart from those of the A&E department and ambulances, would come before the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, partly due to insufficient capacity, and even then solutions have been ineffective. Despite the health and well-being plans being developed from 2021, they've not been yet submitted to the health, to the joint watchdog, which is the Joint Health Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, and they've only just been submitted to the Shropshire Council watchdog, which is the Health and Adult Care Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. To remind council members, the Joint HOSC is a statutory committee set up to review and scrutinise matters relating to the health service in the authority's area and to make reports and recommendations in accordance with those regulations.
Just under 30 seconds.
Thank you. As previously stated, many critical issues have not been examined adequately. Accordingly, I propose that the council resolves that Cabinet works with the joint chairs of HOSC and together lobby government to put sanctions in place where cooperation from health services poor, that HOSC
time up,
officer support is now prioritised.
That's time up now.
Thank you very much.
I take it that the other ones that you're going to read out are the ones that are on in front of the members have seen, basically. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Okay, now it says seconded by or supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Can I narrow that down to one person to second, please? We'll need a second.
Councillor Vasmer, I'll second.
All right, thank you. Got in there just at the last minute. Okay, are you going to reserve your right?
I will reserve my right. Thank you.
Okay. Simon. Councillor Simon.
Sorry, I was just going to notify that there has been an amendment proposed, and I'd like to move that amendment to the motion. An awful lot of the what is included in the motion is actually already existing. So my amendment would be to replace the current motion, keeping item 1, findings of the Ockenden report and recent extremely poor ambulance emergency response and patient transfer times and the inadequate community provision for patients fit for discharge home but requiring support, and then remove notes 2, 3 and 4 and replace the final motion that the council resolves to ask Cabinet to continue working with the chair of HOSC, to continue working with our neighbours in Telford and Wrekin, and to continue lobbying the health and care ministers for greater funding as a system including for recruitment and retention of social care staff. As I said initially, we're already doing this, so we just need to continue doing it.
Good. Okay. So there's an amendment. Is that seconded by Leslie? Right. First of all, as I've done with the other ones, Councillor Bentinck, are you minded to accept those amendments, or?
Would you please repeat them, please, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I can't remember.
Or the proposer of the amendment, please.
Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I would keep your first point, item 1, about the findings of the Ockenden report and that sentence, removing notes 2, 3 and 4 and replace the recommendation that the council resolves to ask Cabinet to continue working with the chair of HOSC, to continue working with our neighbours in Telford and Wrekin, and to continue lobbying the health and care ministers for greater funding as a system, including for recruitment and retention of social care staff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid that I can't accept that.
Okay, that's a shame, obviously, but there you go. Good. Is that seconded? Leslie seconded it. Are you reserving your right, Leslie? Reserving your right. Okay, looking for hands. We are now talking to the amendment, not the original motion. Okay, Leslie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose in some ways this motion is very, sorry. This motion is very similar to the one that we've already debated. We are lobbying ministers. We are talking to Health and Scrutiny. Councillor Bentinck, I cannot insist that Telford and Wrekin do anything. We can work with our neighbours, but I certainly can't insist that their chair of HOSC behaves in a certain way. What I would say is that in answer to some of your other points, we promised you that we would prioritise Health and Scrutiny in terms of scrutiny support. That is being done as we speak. There has been a ministerial visit promised, so that is already being done. And we continue to work on a regular basis right across the system in terms of lobbying and I think the words you used were checking whether things had been done. The Health and Wellbeing Board is extremely good at taking various different SAP and CCG organisations to task, but we can only as good as the information that they will provide us with at the end of the day. So the intention for the amendment is literally to say we will continue what we are doing, and we will also ensure that when we comes to talking about recruitment and retention of social care staff, that is very much a part of the other motion or the result of the other motion that we put earlier on. So I urge everybody to vote for this because we just need to move on now and get this sorted. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to do what I did before. Councillor Vasma, do you want to say anything, or am I okay to?
Just quickly.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to bring you in. That was a secondary reserve there, right? I did look like around the room earlier, so I'm allowing this for Councillor Vasma because he seconded the original motion, just to give him his minute in the sunlight, or 5 minutes in the sunlight. Councillor Vasma, and then I'm going to come back to Councillor Bentinck, who proposed originally, then we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just on, I think it's regrettable that what's point 2 has been taken out with this amendment, and I think it's very important that proper support is given for HOSC and it's prioritised. It's not we need to do that urgently, because unless we do that, we cannot actually pursue all the issues which are being raised as far as NHS is concerned at the moment. So I think that's really important. It's a shame it has been taken out by the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bentinck, do you want to sum up on what you've heard about the amendment before we move to the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As previously stated, I'm afraid I can't support this amendment. It is vitally important that the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee is effective in looking at our health services in Shropshire, and I'm afraid that recent crises have indicated that there needs to be substantial support for this committee. It needs to be prioritised, and we need to be able to ensure that issues properly reach the light of day and are dealt with appropriately and effectively, which I'm afraid has been patchy to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've had an amendment proposed. All those supporting the amendment, please show. Thank you. Those against? That's clearly the amendment has been accepted by the council, which now becomes substantive. As a substantive, all those in favour, please show. Against? Okay, that has now become a substantive. Thank you. We will move on to number 7. The following motions being received from Councillor David Vasma. Sorry, am I interrupting somebody? I can hear voices. The following motions being received from Councillor David Vasma and is supported by the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Vasma.
Thank you, Chair. This motion is really important. There have been 5 serious incidents on the River Severn in Shrewsbury over the last 6 weeks. 2 young men have died, and only last Friday there was another serious incident. We need to take some action on this. There is a Facebook campaign group called Make Our River Safer, and they're calling for fencing and CCTV. The problem, I think, for most people is that they know there are certain parts of the river in Shrewsbury which are not protected by fencing, where there's a path alongside, and it's it feels quite dangerous. I've been cycling along there myself on occasions and walking, and it does feel very unsafe in parts. And I think everybody would accept that putting up fencing in those particular areas, just those areas, would in actual fact make people feel safer and would start to make a contribution towards making the river overall safer. Now, I raised this at Cabinet, and Councillor Carroll pledged that Shropshire would take a lead on this particular issue, in which I thank him for. And I hope that he can take a lead on this issue by meeting up with representatives from the Facebook campaign group Make Our River Safer, and to inform them of what Shropshire is doing. Because the issue for me is that we take some action now. There are people very concerned about this issue, and there's things that we could do now. To put in some fencing, maybe putting ladders up, but these are actions which are available to us. Of course, we need to investigate what are some other issues, what other action could be taken. But I do think that this council needs to take some action, because people feel that nothing is being done. That what happens is that whenever an issue like this arises, whenever there's a death, all the councillors talk about and say, oh, we're going to have an inquiry, we're going to look into it. But we need now to take some action. And also, looking at the wider issue, there is a flooding, and that there are regular problems with people getting into difficulties in floods and often deaths. We need to have a promotional campaign which deals with the issues of flooding, with the issues of people falling into the river. We need that to be done to coincide with the Drowning Prevention Week, which is taking place between the 18th and 25th of June. If we could, if it was given top priority, produce promotional material, I'm sure by that time, to actually start educating the public about how they can best help and deal with this particular situation, and make sure that that we are all that bit safer. I hope very much that you can support this motion. I've seen the amendment which has been proposed. I appreciate some of the provisions which I put in my motion that are in there, but one thing is missing is this element of immediate action. I think we need to show the people of Shrewsbury and the people of Shropshire that we are concerned about this and we are taking action now. And I don't think it's good enough to have another inquiry.
Thank you. Okay, now supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Who's it seconded by? Councillor Bentinck. And are you reserving your right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Carroll, are you?
I believe Councillor Mosley was moving an amendment. I was prepared to wait for the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Mosley.
Thank you. I think everybody's got a copy of the amendment.
Well, bar me. Sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't know there was one.
Well, it went out through emails and it's been published recently. The aim of this is to reflect the real seriousness of the situation, to give some rationale to it, and to add some details to it. Councillor Vasmer knows that things are being done, and they'll be done in an appropriate manner, involving lots of agencies, from the police, the fire service, Team Shrewsbury, the street pastors, all the agencies that join together on Team Shrewsbury. And I went to a meeting of that group. The parents of the young people who have died in the river, 3 or 4 of them in recent years, were there. We heard what was said by them and by the campaign groups that have been formed, and there is urgent and an urgent response to that. I wasn't going to raise this anymore because I'm confident, and given what Dean Carroll has said also, that there is urgent consideration being given
to these problems and trying to find rational, reasonable and serious consideration that I don't think this motion does. That's why it's being amended. The purpose of the amendment is to unify the council, to get a vote that involves us all, I think, and giving a signal to the people of Shrewsbury and the county that we are intent on taking action, apart from giving some consideration and a great deal of it to the parents and the friends and neighbours and the communities of those who are most closely involved. I also hope to greatly improve the motion being put forward by the Lib Dems by basically replacing it and with a serious a real serious, well considered and practical way forward with this in resolving some of these issues. I also want to provide the council and its partners with an agenda for taking it forward with all agencies involved and the public, and it does in actual fact result in a timetable. If we look at it in some detail, there doesn't need to be a consideration of more appropriate barriers being put in place. This should follow a careful consideration and a county-wide review of the circumstances and the sightings of river deaths and of serious life-threatening incidents that have occurred. We need evidence and we need to have an assessment of where those places are so that we can base the action on actual evidence and actual risk assessments. We need to look at the safety equipment that we've got at the moment. We have some life buoys and throw lines, chains and ladders in various places. And I'm talking predominantly about Shrewsbury. We must check that these are adequate and must check that they're fit for purpose. CCTV coverage is very important. We've already heard from Shropshire Council officers that they have improved the system, that they intend to extend it, that the monitoring is now double staffed for 24/7. We want to review whether that is adequate and whether that is enough. Promotional material is, of course, necessary, and learning materials for our schools and colleges and youth activity, youth clubs, etc. Not just for a short period of time, but consistent to drive home the message. Not just while it's in people's minds, but consistently throughout, to drive home the message. We're concerned also that we want to investigate whether some of our licensees within the town are operating according to their full responsibilities and obligations in holding that license. We want the licensing committee to meet and give its attention just to those issues. We also want to see greater account taken of representation made by the public throughout these discussions. And clearly, we've set a target for the 8th of June 2020 when we demand that an interim report and a progress report be presented to Cabinet. I hope we can get all council support for this, and I look forward to seeing the hands going up in a few seconds.
Thank you. When you said April 2020, I think you mean April 2022.
No, I meant June.
All right. Okay. Well, if you're going to get it wrong, why not go the whole hog, eh? Now, who's seconding the amendment? Who's seconding? Right. There you go, Councillor. Well, I've got seconds and seconds, double seconds, my favourite sort of meal. Okay, so I'm going to take Pam then. She's not said anything today, so okay. Councillor Carroll. I take it you're reserving your right.
I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to Councillor Mosley and Councillor Mosley for bringing this amendment. I am going to speak in favour of the amendment, but before I do, on behalf of the administration
please let me first extend our condolences to all of those whose lives have been affected by incidents on rivers and waterways in Shropshire. The tragic recent deaths on the River Severn in Shrewsbury, as well as other cases in which rescues have been carried out, are a matter of great concern, and our thoughts are with the families and friends of those who've lost their lives. Now on to the motion and amendment itself. Team Shrewsbury, of which Shropshire Council is a key partner, has already met to discuss the ways in which the real risks of the river can be better communicated to residents and visitors, especially those enjoying nights out in the town and choosing to walk home beside the river. This has been a continued focus for Team Shrewsbury for a number of years now. In addition, the council has commissioned a further review of safety along the river in Shrewsbury, and this will now be widened out to a county-wide safety review, following on from detailed reviews carried out in past years, which saw the addition of railings where footpaths join the river path, improved lighting, extra grab chains, life buoys and throw lines installed along the river path. This review will highlight any changes to the riverbank, any new options to consider, and take into account the growth of the nighttime economy in Shrewsbury in recent years to identify the most effective ways by which we could improve safety further. The blanket fencing of hundreds of miles of riverbank, however, which is what's included in the original motion, throughout the county would not be the right or appropriate response to the risk that our natural watercourses present. There is a very serious potential that the increased use of railings could in fact make it more difficult for water rescues to be undertaken when required. I believe that Councillor Mosley's amendment strikes exactly the right balance of seeking urgent action without jumping to the first and most obvious conclusion, without taking the advice of engineers and, in fact, as we have already done, approach the coroner's office to establish key themes that are common across fatalities that have taken place in waterways over a number of years. I believe this amendment is the right thing to do, and I hope everybody can support it.
Thank you. Now, perhaps a bit churlish of me, I didn't ask the original proposer if they were prepared to take on board the amendment. I did think, however, that the words that came with it about it being, well, and it being completely different, you weren't likely to, but I should perhaps ask if you would be.
No, I'm not willing to accept this amendment.
That's fine. Okay, good. We know where we are. I thought that would be the case, but I thought, well, having asked on the other amendments, I should. Okay, I am looking round. So what I'm going to do, as I've done with the other one, is I'm going to come back to Councillor Bentinck, who reserved his right to second. If you wish to speak now, then do so, because you may not get a chance otherwise, by the sound of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only wished briefly to say that this is not a new problem. One of my colleagues, retired GP, Dr. Park, who was a GP in the town centre for 30 years, has reported that there were 41 deaths in the 25 years between 1972 and 2007 within Shrewsbury due to drownings in the River Severn. And so this is a problem that's been going on for many years. And so we believe that now is the time for action, not further prevarication. And so I would urge members please to vote against the amendment and vote for the original proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mosley, you reserved your right when you seconded.
Yes, if I may speak now, Chair. I would just support Councillor Alan Mosley's amendment. I think it gives the right degree of urgency to the problem that we obviously have. I speak as a member in Shrewsbury, who I've got a significant stretch to the River Severn to the north of my division. I also live very close to the river and I'm around it a lot. I recognise that as well as being a beautiful natural feature of the environment, which gives a lot of pleasure to a lot of people use it visitors and residents for leisure activities of many types, swimming, rowing, fishing, canoeing, just walking along, but it can also be something which can, on occasion can be a place of danger, and that's tragically been shown very much in recent months. I feel that Councillor Mosley's motion brings together a whole package of measures which, as a totality, I think will address many of the issues, and also gives a timescale to it, which is important. A couple of these things are directly the Council's responsibility, one being CCTV, which I'm pleased to hear from Councillor Carroll that measures are already being taken to step up the provision and monitoring of areas of risk, and also consideration by the Strategic Licensing Committee, which I'm a member, having a special meeting to discuss this issue with alcohol licensees who have certain obligations to their customers when they're particularly vulnerable on leaving. Other measures will require a more collaborative approach, which have begun already. Team Shrewsbury, the emergency services, etc., will be involved, and I urge everyone to support this amendment by Councillor Mosley. The summer months are coming up, and I think we're going to get more and more people by the river. I say the river, obviously there are other rivers in Shropshire, but Shrewsbury is the one where the problems have significantly appeared recently. So I would urge everyone to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Busmer, you proposed originally. Do you wish to say a few words about the amendment?
No, it's the main provisions of the amendment which I support, but as I said before, I want some action taken now.
Okay, good. Right, well, we have an amendment that has been proposed by Alan Mosley, supported by the Labour Group and seconded by Pam Mosley. All those in favour of supporting the motion, please show. Well, I think that's overwhelmingly in favour of. So that motion, the amendment has passed. It now becomes the substantive. All those in favour of the substantive, please show. Good, overwhelmingly in favour, and I know a number of the Liberal Democrats voted with that, which is good. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item 16. That gets us through the woods on motions, which have taken significantly longer than the actual main agenda, but there we go. Questions from members. We've had a question through from Councillor Julia Evans. Julia, do you have a supplementary question? And please make it a new question as opposed to a rehash of the original, if you have one.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I haven't, because I think we have gone through buses completely. Thank you.
Okay, good. So we'll move on to item 17 then, which is the report of the Shropshire and Wrekin Fire and Rescue Authority. Ordinarily, I would invite Councillor David Minery to do this, but he had some sort of message through and had to leave fairly urgently. So, Councillor Wynne, are you prepared to move that we note this report?
Yes, I am, Chair. I'll move the report.
Thank you. Anybody want to say anything? No. We don't need to vote on it because it's only for noting, so thank you. Item 18 of the dates of the council meetings of 22-23. I would like to say that we have made sure this time round that none of them are in the school holidays, which can be difficult for some councillors, but very notably difficult for many of our officers. So that is a positive thing, and thank you very much. So I'm moving that. Is it seconded by you? Very good. Anybody want to talk about it or debate it or make any amendments? No, that's good to see. So item 19 is the exclusion of the public and press. I move that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act of 1972 and paragraph 10.43 of the Council's Access to Information Procedure Rules, the public and press be excluded for the consideration of the remaining business. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Everybody happy with that? Good. Well, we won't